All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the DATAcated Conference May 2021 Industry Edition. Super excited to have you all here with us today. Just checking in on the comments, and I see we've got several hundred people live with us already from across several different countries and cities, and joining us from different social media platforms. So we are live now on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm going to go ahead and jump in here and provide a little welcome to the conference here. Today, we're going to cover 3 out of the 6 industries that we're focused on for this conference. We're going to cover financial services, healthcare, and energy. I want to thank all of the speakers for joining forces here today and tomorrow to help us cover these amazing industries, and we're representing so many great companies here. I also really want to thank our sponsors. We've got TIBCO, Sisense, Single Store, RapidMiner, Pyramid Analytics, ARIA NLG, as well as Panoply. So thank you so much for your support. Of course, I couldn't have done it without our community partners as well. We've got the AI Journal, Business Science, the Ravit Show, DATAcated Academy, Data Science Infinity, Pact, Lights on Data, and Fourth Brain. We've also got some volunteers to thank. So first time we're doing this for this conference, we've actually got some great volunteers who have raised their hand to go ahead and write up some summaries from the sessions that are taking place across today and tomorrow. So we're going to put that all together into a blog post in case people prefer to read versus watching videos live. All right, we're going to also remind you here to go to DATAcated.com to actually sign up for the conference if you're just jumping in across any of the social media platforms and you have not officially signed up. I really encourage you to do so now because that puts you on the list to receive some giveaways, virtual goodies, recordings, and more. All right, we're actually going to go ahead and get started with our first industry here. We're starting off with financial services, and our very first speaker here is Jordan Tigani. He is the Chief Product Officer at Single Store. And today he's going to talk to us about data-intensive applications in financial services. So Jordan tries to keep up with the company's engineering and product teams at Single Store. He co-created Google BigQuery as a founding engineer. He's co-authored 2 books on the subject and served stints as an engineering director and PM director for that product. In addition, he had a near-perfect track record predicting World Cup soccer matches using machine learning and large-scale analytics. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring Jordan up to our virtual stage. Hello, Jordan. Welcome to the conference.
Hi, thanks so much, Kate. I do want to just say that as a word of warning, I may be getting a migraine, and so I may be rendered unable to speak at one point. Hopefully, if that happens, Kate can just turn back on the music, and you don't blame her. But I also might have to close my eyes. But anyway, on with the show, as they say.
Jordan, we're here for you. If you need anything, let us know. We're happy to take over at any point, and we've got Tiffany backstage as well if we need to kind of let her go first, and if you wanted to go after. But I'll let you go ahead and take it away. I'll hop off the stage. Just let me know if you need anything.
Sure, no problem. Thank you. I appreciate that. So the saying "time is money" is an old one, and I think no industry gets that as much as financial services. And in fact, they really quantify it. And a good way to see this is if you're familiar with the book Flash Boys by Michael Lewis, he talks about spread networks, and they built a fiber optic path from New Jersey to Chicago in order to save just 4 milliseconds in the round trip time to get from their data center in New Jersey to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It cost them $300 million to do so. And the reason that they did that, the reason that made sense, is because the value of that time and the value of that data was so high, and in particular, being able to make decisions based on that data. So financial applications have data problems, and those data problems aren't just limited to high frequency trading, algorithmic trading, but things like providing rich personalized customer experiences. And if you want to provide a rich customer experience and provide recommendations, you need to be able to provide those recommendations based on data that's happening right now and based on real world data, and you need to be able to do so quickly. If you want to be able to detect fraud in the middle of a transaction, that requires a lot of understanding of the data about what else is going on. It's got to be up to date, and it's got to be fast. So there's a term for this type of application where data is the real sticking point, and that term is wasn't created by me, but I think is a great way of describing what the problems are, and that's a data intensive application. Martin Kleppman, in his great book, he describes that a data intensive application is one where the primary challenge is data, and in particular, the bottlenecks are either the complexity of data, the size of the data, or how fast the data is changing. And I think one thing that you'll find is that most of the interesting applications of the age really are data intensive. If we look beyond financial services, a variety of people that are changing their markets are really data intensive applications at their core. It's not just something that's sort of built on, but is really the core of what these applications do, and it's the core of what makes them able to provide a new and improved type of experience. So what is it about data intensive applications that they need? What do they need from their data infrastructure? And I think of it as really two things. Fast ingest, low latency, high concurrency. You need fast ingest because you need to be able to react to the latest data. If you're looking at yesterday's data, or if you're looking at data that's delay of 15 minutes or even 15 seconds is too much. You need low latency because Google and Amazon have shown that every 100 milliseconds that it takes, some users are going to lose attention, and then in fraud detection, for example, like you need to be able to understand whether or not something is fraud, and often the SLA is single digit milliseconds. You also need high concurrency because you can't always know or control what's going to happen at a particular time. If there's a major market event is going on, for example, that's going to be the case where access to data is most important and the most number of interesting things are going to happen. So you put these things together and you get something really, really important. But one of the problems that I think people find is that the traditional solutions for analyzing and understanding data or providing the data infrastructure for data intensive applications, it doesn't really work. And so if you look at transactional databases generally are not great at the context, at understanding what's going on sort of outside of pure kind of transactional performance. As you scale and you want to look at what's going on in the rest of the market, you want to do real-time recommendations, etc. You often have a really difficult time. On the other hand, data warehouses are great for analytics, but they're really not great for kind of online access to data. If you think about the fraud detection case or the anything real time, where we have lots of users, a data warehouse is really not the right application to use. So single store is a fast database for that's really designed for data intensive applications, and there's a reason for it, and the reason for it is the architecture. It was designed as an in-memory database that with incredibly low latency, and then a few years ago we added the ability to do to add an analytical storage engine that provide a durable storage engine. So it kind of has both sides of the coin, the incredibly low latency transactions and the ability to do large scale analytics. Analytics at the trillions of rows per second. So you don't have to just take my word for it. We have customers that are experiencing these types of performance goals. Many of these customers don't like to be kind of known by name, but if you look at some of the things that they're doing. So a large content provider is doing 12 million updates per second. So being able to do incredibly fast updates, not just to pens. That's really hard to do. A tier one bank is doing fraud detection on the swipe. Their SLA, their hard SLA, they can't do fraud detection if they can't detect fraud in under 50 milliseconds. Single store is running actually several queries within that 50 millisecond goal. And a large ride sharing app runs 40,000 users per second and a 2 millisecond SLA. So they have a 2 millisecond SLA to do user segmentation. So that's just the kind of thing that you really can't do with most databases. And to talk a little bit about, okay, let's say you're building a simple financial reporting app. Let's say Yahoo Finance, circa 2005. If you're building that kind of application, you can kind of use any database. It's whether you're using Mongo, MySQL, SQL Server, etc. Lots and lots of different databases can work. But if you're building a modern financial app, something that you want to do some sort of richer data, you really need a different type of database. If you're building a reporting app that you want to know just not just sort of what a particular what Google stock is doing today, or even has done in the last couple of months, but you want to know what's going on today, what's being undervalued, what's being then being able to build an API. To go back to actually the Flash Boys book, they built a new exchange for kind of leveling the playing field for high frequency trading, and their reporting arm is IEX Cloud that's using single store to build rich reporting over over financial data. So if you have one takeaway from this talk, I'd like people to understand the value and the power of data intensive of applications. If you have two takeaways from the talk, the other one I'd like you to get is just that single store is a great way to do data intensive applications, and in particular for financial services. And with that, thank you very much, and I can take some questions.
Awesome, thank you so much, Jordan. I'm going to go ahead and make us the same. All right, here we go. Thank you so much for that presentation, Jordan. We do have several questions and comments that came in. We'll try to take two, and I'd love to get started with this question from Akshay. He's asking, how does low latency of data-intensive applications help with regulatory timelines for financial services?
To help with regulatory timelines, I'm not certain about the regulatory timelines, but I have seen the ability to sort of do sorry, my migraine is sort of is hard for me. I'm sorry, I can't talk. Wow. Sorry.
We We can wrap up, Jordan, if that's easier. That's
maybe we'll try some another.
Yeah, absolutely. We can go on to Smita. So she's asking, so dealing with the financial sector, even the slightest error can have a really large impact. So it should be fast but safe as well. So how do you ensure the safety?
Absolutely. And so you have to understand the data birth. I'm sorry, I can't talk. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. But wow.
No worries. Listen, Jordan, health first. Go take care of your migraine. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe someone from Single Store can hop in and answer some of those questions. Really appreciate you presenting here today and powering through your through the migraine. So thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. All right. At this point, I would love to go ahead and move on to our very next speaker. This is Dr. Tiffany Perkins-Munn, and she's the Global Marketing and Head of Data and Analytics at BlackRock. Her talk today is Crawl, Walk, Run. It's all about defining a strategic roadmap from messy data to AI and beyond. Dr. Perkins-Munn has spent the past 20 years using data to drive decision-making within financial services firms. She has implemented research and analytics, machine learning, and big data initiatives across the financial services spectrum, including sell-side, buy-side, and asset management. She's joined BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, in April 2018 to drive the build of a data-driven marketing organization, a groundbreaking undertaking for BlackRock that fuses research, analytics, and data with AI, natural language processing, machine learning capabilities to use research, analytics, and data to drive impactful quantitative decisioning. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Dr. Perkins-Munn to the stage. Hello.
Hi.
Look, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
It does appear to be slightly muffled on the, maybe that's just for me.
Let me just see.
If there is another...
Is that better now?
No, but let me see if I leave. Try speaking without me.
How does that sound? Is that better?
Yes, I think it's better when I'm not here. So I'm going to let you go ahead and I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, are you putting up my slide, Kate? I'm sorry.
Yep, I've got the presentation up. There's a blank screen at the moment, but I have your screen.
Okay, let me just pull it. I'm not exactly sure why it's giving me a blank screen. I'm just gonna share it again, just to.
I saw it there earlier.
I'm sorry?
I saw it there earlier and then it went blank.
Yes, let me just find it here. Oh my. 1 second. I'm sorry.
No worries.
It must be here because.
Got a lot of welcomings here. Welcome.
Thank you. My it seemed to have disappeared and it's not giving me the option. Where is it? This is really bizarre. 1 second, let me just try it again.
Sure.
Share screen, window. It's literally not showing up. 1 second, I'm gonna close out and go back in. This is only gonna take a minute and then I'm gonna be ready. Okay.
I'm afraid to speak because I sound like an echo when I speak. I wonder why that's happening.
Let's try it again. Okay, so I'm opening it back up, and now I'm going to try to share it again, and hopefully this works. And if it doesn't, I'm just going to chat.
Yeah, Tiffany, if you want to come back, that might help.
Yeah, even though I did have some really cool slides to share. So let's just see. Yeah, got it. I don't know what something strange happened.
There we go.
There we go. Let me just make it larger so that everybody can see it. Slideshow. Okay, how's that?
Perfect. I'm letting you take it away. I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Tiffany Perkins-Munn, and I'm honored to be representing at the BlackRock at the DATAcated Conference. And thank you, Kate, for having me. I'm excited to hear all of the incredible DATAcated presentations. By way of introduction, I am a managing director at BlackRock, and I lead the global marketing RAD team, which is a firm-wide center of excellence dedicated to advancing the firm's strategic growth priorities using research, analytics, and data. And for over 20 years, I've been using data to drive decision-making in the financial services industry, including firms like Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Citadel, JP Morgan, et cetera. Today, though, I'll be speaking about some of the work that we're doing at BlackRock in using data science and analytics to understand our clients and drive data-driven decision-making. So like many of you, we work at a large and complex organization that has many different moving parts comprised of various businesses, products, regions, and historically, these different parts often worked in isolation from each other. I know that sounds familiar. Our team was formed a few years ago to foster greater collaboration and sharing of best practices across the firm, especially from like a research, analytics, and data perspective, so that our clients could actually have a more connected experience across all of their touch points with us. And data science plays a major role in that transformation. And in order for that transformation to be effective, we need to not only stitch together all of our data so that we can find the most compelling insights, but we need to take those insights to our stakeholders across the firm who have varying, levels of quantitative and technical sophistication. And we need to use that to drive marketing, product, and business strategy. So in this journey, we've experimented with dozens of different tools, technologies, and analytic techniques. And today I wanted to talk you through a few examples, however many I have time for, of data-driven insights that have really resonated with our stakeholders. And perhaps you can apply to your business problems as well. So if I think about the milestones towards being more data-driven, we start with companies that are asking data, what's that? And it's really about educating stakeholders, evangelizing the importance of data, starting to collect information. And then on level 2, you have a lot of data, but now the question is, what do you do with it? So you start cleaning it, you start stitching it together, you start collecting more data to really build and enhance your stories. Then you get to level 3, where you have some insights, but you really need to understand how different variables and metrics work together, and you might start doing different types of statistical analyses. Level 4 is where you have clean data and you have well-defined outcome variables. But now you need to build models and to try to productionalize them, which is where machine learning comes in. And then level 5 is when you really have moved into an advanced AI landscape where you have the models. Now you need a consistently running machine that's self-directing and sort of auto-optimizing all of the work that you're doing. Now, in most data science settings, we spend most of our time talking about what happens at levels 4 and 5. Yet the paradox, and as many of you probably understand, is that we know that 80% of all data science is data cleaning. So we spend 80% of our time at level 2, and we found that 80% of the impact, at least in the early stages of an organization, comes from level 3. So I'm going to try to focus somewhere between 2 and 3 and 4 today, depending upon how much I get through. So if you think about alignment on this next slide, this example is from level 2. And this is an example from a situation we experienced a few months ago. One of our clients came to us and said that they were getting too many emails from asset managers. We decided to take a look at our data to make sure we weren't part of the problem. And what we ended up building is what you see here, which is what we call the client 360-degree view. And it shows us for any given organization, in this case, the 4-City Retirement Association, what at one quick glance, it's a snapshot of all of their interactions with us across the firm. And we see on the top left, in the top left chart there, our client leads from various businesses and product groups who manage our relationship with the client. So you can see there's no one person. The relationship management is distributed across various business groups. In that middle table, you see how many contacts we have at this institution, how many opted into emails, how many open those emails. And you can also see the top contacts in that lower middle sort of lower box that says contacts. You can see the top contacts at this client whom we're engaging with, and at a glance, which channels these clients are most engaged with. So this view actually, generated a lot of excitement across the business, because right now this data is spread across many different databases, each with different front ends and different access protocols. And by bringing all of this data together in one easy to understand view, we were able to make it accessible and also allow partners to derive business value from it. But what else you can see, if you look at the bottom, that one little orange bar at the bottom, what you see there is it's summarizing email engagement, and it shows you that over 4,000 individuals at this client have opted in. Basically, they said, yeah, we're okay with you sending us email. But in the next chart, in the next box, you see we've only targeted just over 2,000 individuals, meaning there are missed opportunities for engagement. We're only reaching out to half of the people who said that they were willing to accept emails from us, right? What else can this view tell you? Well, if you go back to the middle top table, that last row in that table indicates the maximum number of emails sent to an individual within the 6-month period that you see represented on this page. That number is 238. I mean, wow, no wonder clients complain and aren't responsive to engagement tactics. If they are getting that many emails from each of their partners, they really don't have enough time to respond. Now, understanding engagement with our clients is great, obviously, but we should also identify key outcome metrics. And there are several outcome metrics that we like to use. I just wanted to plug this one, Net Promoter Score, a little bit of background for those who may be less familiar. A Net Promoter Score is used as a strategic management tool, basically for assessing clients' likelihood to recommend you, right? It's also an indicator of advocacy. So not only will they recommend you to others, but they will advocate on your behalf. It was introduced by Fred Reichelt in his 2003 Harvard Business Review article, and it's one of the key management metrics across the industry. And this metric is important. So the score ranges from -100 to +100. Anything over 100 is good. Anything over 0 is good. Anything 70 above is considered world-class. Negative is obviously not good. But it's important because what we've learned is that it's indicative of an important stickiness factor, like the depth of client relationships. So the more a firm interacts with the client across multiple channels, the more likely that client is to recommend and ultimately advocate for the firm. So the bar chart that you see here shows that if you are interacting with clients on one channel, they're not that engaged and much less likely to recommend you. Whereas when you're interacting with them across 5 channels, not only do they have a world-class NPS score, which means that they are likely to recommend us, but they are also out there advocating for us, right? They're becoming evangelists and ambassadors of sorts, which is great. Now, this next example that I'll show you is firmly in level 3, I'd say. And it's about using data to understand behavior and drive decisions. So we're pulling together a myriad of different data elements and analyses into a comprehensive view for ease of use. But we also want to help guide partners on what specifically they should focus on for resource, talent, and budget allocations, right? We only have limited budget. We want to use that efficiently and effectively as possible. Sorry, let me get to the slide. We want to use that efficiently and as effectively as possible, where we're going to get the most return on our investment. So one technique that we use is illustrated on this page. It's called a key driver analysis. And it tells you the relative importance of certain variables on your outcome. And there are different ways that you can do it, different types of regressions that you can use. You have to use the one that makes the most sense. But most importantly, its relative ease of use of computation and rich history make it the go-to procedure or one of them for identifying key drivers. So with an analysis like this, you can start to prioritize what to focus on. And the great thing, and this is like a real example, the great thing about this is that it's so visual, right? So often people have a hard time explaining something, even as basic as regression. And what the key driver quad does is that it makes the output super visual and insightful and immediately actionable. So the things that you are doing well on that are important to clients are in the top right. The things that you are doing well on or not doing well on, but also are important to clients in the top left. So right then you have, here are a group of activities that we should keep doing, and here are a group of activities that we need to focus on because they are important, but we're clearly not doing well on them. So just to wrap up really quickly on the final slide, I think I'll skip a couple of them here. I'll go here. I want to acknowledge that lots of hard work in the early crawl and walk stages can be tedious and effortful and often mind-numbing. And instead of viewing these levels as being rigidly sequenced, it can help to approach them in parallel as well, right? So we're crawling, we're walking for the most part where we can and should. We should be running and flying in parallel, right? In strategic use cases to keep the organization inspired and to keep up the momentum. But this is a necessary corollary to doing the hard work of cleaning the data and stitching it together and ensuring that not only do we always get to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but that we get to experience slivers of light on a daily basis. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Tiffany. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. We've got a lot of questions and comments that flew in. I'm going to go ahead and start with a question here from Scott Taylor. And he has a great story. Question 360. Was this part of a bigger master data effort at BlackRock?
Yes, it's part of our data-driven optimization strategy. So we are thinking across sales, marketing, and product, and how we can be more comprehensive and holistic, and how we are both approaching clients so that we know the most and best and high quality, accurate information about clients, but also from the client perspective so that they have a better, more connected client experience and they feel like we are engaging with them in a way that is seamless and logical as opposed to disjointed, which it sometimes can be.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that. And we'll take one more question here from Mihal. He's asking, what were the biggest challenges in organizational buy-in and moving up the levels, to do the work to go from level 2 to 3, for example?
Yes, I have 2 words for you. Use cases. Use cases. Don't try to boil the ocean. Come up with really tangible, partner with someone to come up with really tangible use cases where you're using a little piece of data to illustrate when we have data, these are the types of learnings that we can generate, and then build from there. So I think getting organizational buy-in has to do with stakeholder management, partnering with across the organization, but really building out those use cases until you get to a point where it's like, well, it's so obvious, it works in every single use case. We should be investing in this and building more.
Great, Tiffany, thank you so much. That's all the time we have, unfortunately, even though we have so many more questions for you. Thank you so much for taking the time and taking the time for the presentation.
Thanks, Kate. I loved it. Enjoy.
Right. Okay, I'll see you.
Bye.
Okay, so that was talk number 2. We're going to go ahead and keep this data party moving. First, before I introduce our next speaker, let's briefly hear from one of our sponsors, Pyramid Analytics. They're actually back for a 3rd time, so let's give them some airtime here.
Making data-driven decisions requires trust. Trust in the reliability of your data, your tools, and your people. If you're like most, you've invested in overhyped, self-serve analytic tools with promises to make sense of all the chaos, only to find out they don't deliver on your most basic needs. Your users are left to analyze siloed data with complex tools, resulting in isolated and conflicting insights, making it impossible to unite your organization and have the confidence to make data-driven decisions. What if you could restore trust in analytics by consolidating your fragmented tools, leverage your existing data investments, and provide advanced insights for all users? With Pyramid Analytics, you can. Our platform, unlike other BI tools, was built to adapt to your needs, not ours. Whether your data is on-site or in the cloud, you can easily run analyses from multiple sources with no data extraction required. We enable users to access analytics from any device through a secure, web-based system that provides effortless collaboration without concerns of data leakage. And whenever your business needs change, seamlessly adjust your data strategy and architecture without disrupting the environment your users have now come to trust. Pyramid Analytics. Analytics you can trust.
Awesome. You're going to hear from Pyramid tomorrow during the retail talks. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring up our next speaker. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Debbie Williams. She's the Director of Data Strategy at Bank New York Mellon. And today she's going to talk to us about the single source of truth. Is it aspirational or outdated or both? Debbie leads the data advisory practice as part of Bank of New York Mellon's Omni Digital Services Strategic Advisory. She is responsible for assisting clients with the design and implementation of data oversight frameworks and processes. Prior to taking this role at the end of 2020, she led the rollout of the Enterprise Data Management Framework at Bank of New York Mellon globally and was the primary data liaison for regulatory agencies and internal audit. She has more than 25 years of experience in financial services and technology and has advised on market trends, product positioning, and strategy, as well as guiding financial institutions on technology adoption. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Deb Williams. Hello, welcome to the DATAcated Conference.
Hi, Kate. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us here. I'm going to hop off the stage and let you take it away. I'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. I just listened to Tiffany. It was great to listen to how she has built out her data group. I'm going to take a slightly different tact for a little while and ask everyone to maybe take a step back from the accepted norms and challenge some of the thinking about how we manage our data supply chain. And I haven't come to this sort of spot accidentally. I've probably traveled the same path as the rest of you in trying to figure out how we come up with a single source of truth for our data. And as Kate said, in working with our clients as well, we've probably all grown up with this idea that a single source of truth is something that would be good for our organizations. And I think we've worked really hard at figuring out what that single source of truth should be, and then in reconciling and tracing and doing all sorts of backflips to make sure that we are clear on the single source of truth. And I wanted to challenge that assumption for the moment, and maybe for the next 7 or 8 minutes or so, lead everyone through some thinking on this. So in at least 1 or 2 dark moments, I've sat back to think about how I could make sure that we had clearly established, especially in financial services with the regulatory environment and the expectations, how we had established the single source of truth. And what I realized in discussing and thinking that what we're really trying to establish overall is authenticity. And that is that the data that you have is authentic to the folks that manufactured it. This idea that we can provide authenticity out to the end users of data, I think, is what we're actually chasing after when we try and establish a single source of truth. And if you think back over time, as we've developed our data management practices, and you think about how we've gotten to where we are, this common understanding of the value of the data, as in the data itself, we've tried to manage through going directly back to a system of record for that data element. And at least if you're in financial services, that has been the source of one of our major challenges. First and foremost, our systems of record are often old and maybe a little creaky. They are operational, real time, and highly sensitive. We need them to be up and running and processing transactions 24/7, and we certainly don't want data inquiry to get in the way of their operations. So right away we had a conflict in taking data from a system of record. In addition to that, I think that the other challenges, and I've certainly experienced many of these, are that the data as it's created in the system of record isn't always exactly how the end user downstream of that data might want it. And therefore, we have issues of normalization, standardization, of course, but also just transformations that happen along the way and enrichments. And so I guess what I'd like to say to this group, and I'd be curious to get the debate going potentially in questions or after this session, is, what are we trying to achieve with a single source of truth? Have we figured out how to make that happen? And moreover, I would challenge that some of the tools that we have available today make this concept of a single source of anything potentially even undesirable. If you were to step back and look at the supply chain in any other industry, data aside, I think that we would probably agree that a single source of anything leaves you vulnerable and potentially bottlenecked in your supply chain. And yet we've tried to enforce this on our data. And so what I would suggest is that there might be many ways to acquire, to enrich, and to supply data to end users, whether that's through a more traditional warehouse and marts or not, and that the concept that we're trying to chase is actually authenticity, and that what we should focus on maybe more accurately is how we establish authenticity, track authenticity, and probably most importantly from a governance perspective, how we establish accountability for the authenticity of our data in our organizations. And so, I wanted to mention a few tools that we have found useful ourselves and our clients have found useful in establishing this authenticity. Some of it really has nothing to do with technology. Some of it is organizational and process oriented. I think that first and foremost, within the businesses that create and produce your data, understanding who are the individuals who both understand your data and can establish and be accountable for its accuracy are critical. Unless you can do that as a starting point, I don't think that you will ever be able to create an infrastructure in which the authenticity of your data can be fully established, certainly not to the regulatory standards, at least that we have to meet. So first and foremost, I would say you need to start with accountability for the data and a clear understanding of who those individuals are and how they establish the accuracy of data. Once you've got that piece in place, then I think there's a whole bunch of tools that allow you to step away from a very tightly controlled data supply chain. And I'm thinking of things like lineage tools that can track the hops and the transformations of data. I know we all have them. And at least at BNY Mellon, lineage became a dirty word for a little while, but I think we are back to embracing it. I think that the catalog tools that we have today have come a long way towards helping us to establish that accountability by allowing us to register our data, to capture the owners of that data, and to also capture the metadata associated with how it's been enriched, who's done that, and for what purpose. And I would also like to suggest that the availability of data in multiple places through the supply chain also enables you to create a flexibility and a usability for your downstream users that a tightly coupled supply chain does not allow for. So for example, we have begun to make great use of virtual data models rather than having all of the data warehoused in a tightly controlled, for example, relational data model. And that has begun to make a huge difference in the availability and usability of data for downstream users. And so, I guess I would love to get a conversation started with the folks listening in terms of your views on how you single source. Do you believe it is something we should still be striving towards, some ideal? Do you believe it is outdated, or potentially some combination of the two? What tools have you used to establish sourcing, and how do you control it today? And moreover, do you agree that the goal of a single source is really authenticity? So Kate, I was kind of hoping to open it up to discussion.
Hey, absolutely. Thank you so much, Deb. You're really reminding me of the good old days of when I worked in financial services before joining the data world. We have several comments and definitely questions for you. I'll go through some of the comments first. You're resonating with a lot of folks. Cindy from ThoughtSpot says, this is well said. It's tragic but true. System of record are old and creaky and highly sensitive. People are saying single source of truth is to achieve consistency between data consumers. We've got lots of folks saying that they resonate with the way you said authenticity, right? And you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned enrichment. There was a question here, just scrolling down to it here. Lots of comments. It's hard to find questions when there's so many comments. David also has thoughts on this. He says the single source of truth is about consistency, right? Trying to avoid the one spreadsheet with different values than another. And okay, here's the question from Ramdas. He's asking, is all of this data pulled in at runtime and visualized, or is all of this persisted in a common data platform?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and that's one of the reasons why I think that a tightly coupled supply chain that's entirely dependent on a system of record is getting a bit antiquated in my personal opinion. I think that you have data that persists, especially if you think about things like time series, where they have value over time. You also have things like account balances, where the data is virtually irrelevant past a point in time for some purposes. And so I think that an understanding of those requirements helps you to drive that sourcing better than a static view of what data needs will be into the future. And I think that's what's so tragic about adhering to this single source of truth as the only place you can source your data from, because I think that actually we're discovering that data uses far exceed the system of record capabilities, and without some view on that supply chain, right? Like you really get stuck in a very rigid manner.
Yes, we don't want to get stuck, Deb. So we have time for, let's do one more question here from Christiane. She says, Deb, how did you approach consolidating different systems to achieve one source of truth? Give them the answer. How did they do it?
So I think what we have done, and obviously we are a financial institution, right? So internally, we have some things that must be validated, verified, signed off on, under penalty of criminal charges, right? And so there are some things like our financial records for which we have defined the supply chain, right? We have defined, I've seen some points on trust and credibility. We have defined the checks. We have defined the accountable individuals for signing off. And we have defined acceptable sources, and we've defined a process of reconciliation so that we know that what is being done in our accounting systems, for example, is reflected in our financial records. And I think for some data, you absolutely have to lock the supply chain down. But all I'm suggesting is that isn't true for everything. And I know, for example, one area where we've had tremendous debate is for example, the definition of customer, who the customer is. There's a legal entity definition, there's a relationship definition, there's a credit risk definition, and we have implemented tooling to make sure those definitions are always consistent. But just because they need to be consistent doesn't mean they need to be the same.
Yes, absolutely. So Deb, I think we are at time now. You have probably over 100 questions that just came in. So if you got time to hop over to LinkedIn and respond to a couple, that would be great. But either way, thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for taking our questions.
No problem. Happy to be here. Hope I got some people to think a little today. Have a great day, everyone.
Really all right, thank you. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and, like I always say, keep this data party moving. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our very next speaker, Laura McDonald. She is the Commercial Account Executive at ThoughtSpot, and her talk today is They're Banking on Us, How Neobanks Are Gaining Market Share. She joins us today to bring a fresh perspective on neobank trends in financial services space today. Although she studied French at university, spending time and living working in Paris, Laura's interest in this dynamic area stemmed from her early career experiences in Bloomberg. Since joining ThoughtSpot in 2019, she's developed a particular interest in working with data-centric neobanks and fintechs across Europe who need a business user-friendly analytics solution for all levels of the organization to quickly act on the vast amounts of customer data they collect on a daily basis. Laura will speak about how neobanks are leveraging data to unlock customer loyalty, and no doubt she'll fit in one or two of her infamous puns. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and bring Laura up on our virtual stage. Hello, Laura. Welcome to the DATAcated Conference.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me okay? Just to check that first of all.
Absolutely, we can hear you, we can see you. I'm going to hop off the virtual stage and let you take it away, and I'll jump back in about 10 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Kate. And it is a true pleasure to be here with you all today at the DATAcated Conference. Now, I'm here in the ThoughtSpot European headquarters in the City of London, which is the pulsing heart of the financial services industry, with Bloomberg, Lloyds, BlackRock, who you just heard a great presentation from Tiffany on, is just around the corner. Now, these corporations are the cornerstone of the traditional financial services industry, but there is a global trend that is sweeping around the world and disrupting the status quo. It's a trend which has a market share of $27 billion, has tripled in growth since 2017, and that thrives off momentous volumes of app-driven consumer data. It's the tidal wave rise of the neobank. And in the next 10 minutes, I'll be fin-serving up to you why data is critical for these neobanks to gain the market share of consumer loyalty. For context, as Kate mentioned, I work for ThoughtSpot, the analytics solution who pioneered search and AI-driven analytics to enable business people, not just data experts, to have a fluid conversation and ask and answer questions of data stored in a cloud data warehouse without heavy reliance on technical teams. And so what we hear from our traditional financial services customers like Nationwide Building Society or National Australia Bank is the need to really digitally transform as these new digital native neobanks enter onto the scene and raise the bar in terms of how they're using and monetizing data. Now, Thomas Mazzaferro, who's the Chief Data Officer at Western Union, actually spoke to us about how they've seen 100% year-on-year growth of their digital platforms in the first 2 quarters of 2020, which, especially with the context of the pandemic, demonstrates this consumer shift to managing independently their own finances via a digital platform. So what exactly is a neobank? Well, they'll typically launch post-2010. They're cloud native, they're accessible through a mobile application. And all of this means is that they are digitally native by nature. And so they're able to track and harness huge volumes of consumer interaction data through these mobile devices, which with the right back-end and front-end technology, they are able to harness across the organization and really drive that product iteration to gain the market share of consumer loyalty. So let's explore together 3 key areas where data is being used to drive business point decisions: consumer-focused product design, integrity as an asset, and innovation. So we talk about understanding what the consumer wants, but it's not just using data to understand what they want. It's using this data across the organization. Because if you think about the marketplace, neobanks are acting in a very, very saturated space. There's maybe 300 of them worldwide. So having a clear understanding of what the product needs to achieve and who it's targeting is critical for the growth and success of these organizations. And if we look at how they're actually organized in terms of the structure of the organization, what we often see is roles from traditional business units, so sales, marketing, R&D, actually forming part of a cross-functional product team centered around one or more products. And by products, here we mean a debit card, a credit card, a savings account accessible through these mobile applications. So empowering these product teams with the freedom and ability to interact and ask questions off a centrally governed, non-siloed data source encourages this collaboration between the team members and allows them to faster get to the answer to important questions like, in which direction do we take our product? In which order do we prioritize iterations? And will this change negatively affect the consumer experience? And the consumer experience, thinking about how we live in a kind of instant gratification society, is especially key in this area. Because what we see is the more intuitive, the simpler the user interface, the more likely to retain that customer on their product and their application. So having these kind of reporting and data feeds that give visibility into the changing dynamics of the marketplace and consumer wants is not just important for the product design, but also the general strategy of the company. So if we take an example from France, there's a company called Vibe, which is a neobank who specifically target the 12 to 17 market segment. Now they've amassed a consumer base of over 1.5 million customers already since their launch in 2019, which is a clear example of how they're using data to consistently and successfully reiterate a product that's specifically designed for a certain market segment. On the other hand, what Kantar says is that for neobanks to grow their share of the electronic wallet, they really do need to diversify their portfolio. And I'm actually working with one of the fastest growing Swedish neobanks who are looking to expand out into 10 different EU countries in the next 5 years. So they're now adapting their data and reporting feeds internally so that these product teams and senior leadership are actually now doing cross-analysis across their product portfolio to understand which options to give versus which new products to launch in different geographies, depending on the consumer trends within that geographical space. So this is talking about using data for product iteration in response to consumer demand. But another trend that we're seeing in this area is using data to understand how to leverage integrity as an asset. Now, what does that mean? Well, neobank and fintech founders were particularly galvanized by the consumer trends to give their business to organizations which adopt ESG frameworks, so environmental, social, and governance, which are particularly popular with millennials or the Gen Z. So Tomorrow, for example, which is a neobank based out of Germany, they're offering to their customers a wooden debit card compared with single-use plastic. And they're actually investing back into sustainable bonds. And they've already done about $4.3 million worth of investment into renewable energies. So using data to firstly understand the ESG impact of the organization and then correlating this with customer acquisition is helping the marketing and strategy teams understand which consumer segment to target, who are most likely to give their business to a banking provider who shares their values. Now, we mentioned earlier on the challenge for neobanks to really excel in this saturated market space. And what we're sometimes seeing is that there is a tendency to over pivot in terms of pure growth and customer acquisition at the expense of profitability. But what we're seeing, and there's a really interesting article actually by Octopus Ventures on this, is that ESG stocks actually display more resilience to economic shocks and are less volatile to their conventional counterparties. So if neobanks are tapping into this space, they're looking at both potentially gaining consumer demand and customer acquisition, and also potentially being more attractive to investment and VC funding. Now, we can't ever talk about data and analytics without mentioning the third umbrella term and buzzword in the industry of innovation, which is critical for neobanks, not only to expand on their core offerings, but develop a unique combination of products and services that really helps drive that disruption in the marketplace. Now, one of the things that we're starting to see in both customers and in the market in general is creating new revenue streams by monetizing data for third parties or partner organizations. So to give you an example, MasterCard have a specific data and services arm who are doing exactly this. And they've actually embedded ThoughtSpot into a customer-facing portal to allow their corporate customers to use the search and the AI functionality to have a personalized and sophisticated way of analyzing consumer payment flows to faster understand how these are operating and where to make changes to get to the money faster. Now, innovation also comes with a real focus on time to market and how quickly can you innovate and bring something new to the forefront. So especially looking at the neobank context where everything has to act with agility, it's a very, very digitally driven, fast world they're operating in. And what we heard from Marcos Peralta, who, to use this MasterCard example, is the senior vice president for this MasterCard data and services arm, is that it's now super easy for his developer team to build these, what we call interactive data apps, that they were actually able to do in one day what had taken them 2 years to build internally to bring visualizations and interactivity to their data. And that's his words, not mine. But if we translate this into a neobank context, partnering with different organizations and different technologies to help expedite on bringing new services and new innovations to market is also going to help not just drive that consumer and customer acquisition, but potentially present new ways of making that shift to profitability. And really this...
Oh, keep going. I just wanted to let you know we're close to time and I want to take questions, but keep going, Laura.
Yeah, perfect. That's no problem. I've almost finished. Because what we have to mention, of course, is internal innovation as well in the way that companies are using data across the organization. And we're seeing this shift from taking that heavy lifting away from building and reporting and siloed ownership of the data to create a really fluid discussion across the organization and innovate internally and not just externally. So what have we learned today, or what hopefully have you learned today? Clearly, simply having and consolidating data is not enough of a USP for neobanks, who are at that inflection point of growth with data as the fuel to drive this in the right direction, whether that's niche market segment, wider portfolio, continuing the focus on customer acquisition, or making that shift to profitability. But with this need to innovate at speed and act with agility, it will be those companies who are thinking differently, perhaps, about how to use data within and outside of the organization, who are going to win the race in this perpetual need to gain more customers, even across national boundaries, and be able to successfully make that shift from growth to data-driven profitability. So I'm super excited to bring Kate back in and take questions from the audience. And of course, it goes without saying that if anyone's interested in hearing more about ThoughtSpot, you now also know where to find me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Laura, for the presentation. We have questions flowing in. That's why I jumped in. I want to make sure we can take at least a couple of questions before our time is up.
Please.
So I'll jump right into it. Albert here has a question. He's saying, Laura, what are the limitations of neobanks and how could they be made more useful to customers?
Yeah, great question, Albert. Thank you. I think one of the limitations of neobanks is because they've started out in usually kind of just as we mentioned, this focus on pure customer acquisition at the expense of profitability. When they're looking at coming up against these, what we call the incumbent banks, so the larger, much more established financial organizations, they have a much bigger wealth that they're able to deploy quickly to, as we've just seen with MasterCard, they've created their own data and services arm, for example. So I think one of the limitations of the neobanks is potentially not being able to keep up with the disruption that they've caused and eventually be taken back over by the incumbent banks, which is actually quite interesting. And this kind of flows into your second point of how can they be made useful to customers, is what we're seeing as well as the larger corporations actually partnering with these neobanks so that they can bring the sort of digitally focused, innovative mindset from neobanks coupled with, the established growth of the FinServe and create a real, 360 now digitally native offering to customers.
Thank you so much for that. And I think you might have sort of touched on this in the first question, but there's another question from Kimberly that asks this a slightly different way. So she asks that given that neobanks are digitally native by nature, do you see neobanks pushing out traditional banks or moving towards neobank formats? And she's sensing a lot of M&A activity our way. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Kimberly, I would completely agree with you. There is a huge amount of M&A activity that we're seeing in the marketplace, and not just M&A in terms of larger banks actually acquiring smaller banks, but in some cases like RBS, for example, is another one of the companies we work with, and they've actually developed their own neobank called Nettle. So they've actually taken what is happening in the marketplace and they haven't acquired another company. They've actually, created their own arm. So there's different ways in which I think the incumbent banks are approaching, this challenger wave. And it's either looking at that, okay, how can we collaborate together, or how can we take what's happening and develop our own version of this? So it's a kind of interesting space to watch. And I think one of the challenges that we'll see for neobanks going forward and how they bring this into their operating model. Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely an interesting place to watch. And Laura, thank you so much for providing a truly fresh perspective to our conference. Really enjoyed your presentation and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me and thank you everyone for tuning in. It's been a real pleasure.
All right. On this note, we've actually wrapped up our very first industry. So we've completed the financial services industry talks. We're going to go ahead and move this forward over to healthcare. We're going to kick things off with Charles Holub. He's the global head of data monetization strategy at Sisense. And today he's going to talk to us about analytics monetization and business growth in healthcare. So Charles's group is designed to accelerate digital transformation by driving business innovation with chief data officers and CXOs across industries towards new revenue streams by leveraging Sisense cloud platform to infuse analytics into high-margin commercial offerings. Charles joined Sisense from GE Healthcare, where he actually spent 15 years in various leadership positions globally. As the Executive Vice President of Analytics and AI for Digital Product Management, Charles pitched, incubated, staffed, launched, and scaled the analytics and AI business unit from 0 to tens of millions of high-margin recurring revenue by infusing analytics across the various GE Healthcare business units. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Charles up onto our DATAcated stage. Hello, Charles. Welcome.
Thank you, Kate. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. Calling in from New York. Hopefully you see a little bit of that background.
I can see the background. Yes, I'm calling in from New York too. You'll hear the sirens from Main Street flying by.
I'm here.
So, Charles, I won't take up much of your time. I'm gonna leave the virtual stage and I'll share your screen and I'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Kate. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for the organization. I'm really, really excited to be participating today. The opportunity with data is limitless. And so what I wanted to focus my attention on today is something that everybody believes and everybody's talking about, but I'd like to say it once more. Every analytics, artificial intelligence, or data initiative should have a business outcome tied to it. Okay, and so when you try to serve your internal stakeholders or you try to serve your external stakeholders, which I will be discussing about today, it's very important that you try to hit on those business metrics that define success. And they are very simple. It says a top line improvement, you create revenue, or bottom line improvement, you optimize margin, you reduce costs, you increase operational efficiency. And the reason I want to mention that to you is I've had the chance, like Kate described, to do that in the healthcare industry. So I was the first data business within the GE healthcare company. And I had limitless access to data, limitless access to domain expertise, had access to great technologies. And the question was, how do we create more value for our customers? And I'll tell you 3 specific stories across clinical, financial, and operational outcomes. Hopefully they resonate with you. And what I do day in and day out is probably the best job in the world, is I help companies leveraging our platform to do just that, to infuse analytics into commercial offerings, as well as a standalone or within their existing products, and to create that value for their customers and charge a little bit against that value to generate revenue. So monetization is my day-to-day job, and I'll share a little bit of that. I'll start with something that is relevant for this conference. You'll hear a lot of us data leaders, and I want to make a statement or a prediction that the pool of CEO by 2030, let's say 9-10 years from now, will actually consist of many chief data officers. And the reason is, if you listen carefully to all the presentations, to be a good chief data officer, you need a couple of things. One is you need to understand your market extremely well. Your market, your customers, how do you generate revenue today? How can you do more for your customers with the data, internal and external? You need to understand everything in your company. You cannot just be a vertical, everybody's delegating analytics to you and wish for the best. It has to be a cross-functional, cross-organization, cross-country effort. And the third one is you have to understand technology. So it's a real play around domain expertise, data, and technology, driving more value for your customers. And if I think of a good chief executive officer, well, usually they're going to be extremely good at those things. And so I believe there will be, and some of them are already there, a career path for CDOs that actually will become the chief executive officers. So pretty encouraging for all of us on this call. And the reason is one of those. So this is a study that came from Gartner some time ago, and I really relate to this one. Is we were born as data managers, and it's true in the healthcare industry. It's probably true in every industry as well. But we were a cost center, usually buried into a CIO organization. And then because we knew how to move data securely around, then we were primed to become the best at extracting knowledge from that data. So we evolved into analytics leaders. It's not about the data, it's about the information. It's about the knowledge. It's about the impact of the information you can provide. And what's helped is at the same time, there's been this huge wave about the last 10, 15 years around digital transformation. And many failed, or many are still ongoing, I would say. The ones that have been extremely successful are the ones that centered their digital transformation around data, because it's an existing asset within your company. And all you need is to add domain expertise and a little bit of technology to actually extract and create new value. But still, most of that would sit into a chief digital officer organization, which sometimes was under the chief information officer, and most of the time to serve your internal stakeholders. So here is the market for monetization. This is where it's born. Every company has been on that journey to extract value from their data. And it's true again for hospitals, healthcare systems, payers, and providers in the healthcare industry. And all of them have a huge backlog of things they still need to do. And what they start doing is say, you know what, I don't have to build it. I don't have to staff a 10 people organization, a 100 people organization to go after that. All I have to do is to buy the knowledge and the insights in order to make the decisions and create the value. And that demand to fulfill that backlog of analytics they cannot do internally is a demand of the analytics monetization market or data monetization market or whatever you want to call it, the need for company to create more value for their customers. And so companies start to answer to that. When I was at GE Healthcare, we started doing just that. We helped care teams, we helped prayer providers, we had pharma company, we have the insurance sector, not to create more analytics, but to consume more analytics. And guess what? This is when we became a profit center. And as a profit center, now you have a seat at the CXO table. That's why you see most of the new chief data officers that are being appointed sitting under directly the chief executive officer, because this is where the job belongs. It is a P&L role that should mandate to create value internally, create the DNA across the organization, and create value for their customers as a potential revenue stream. So super exciting times as we evolved into becoming a profit center. And the reason is simple, is data in itself is zero value. So if I sell you a bit of data, what I'm selling you is work. Somebody in your organization has to do something with it. Somebody has to find a way to visualize, present it, interact with the end user, the user experience, create some analysis, find someone who can make a decision. That person might make a decision. Only if and when they make a decision, value is created. And if value is created, the credit doesn't go to the person who gave the data. The credit will go to the person that made the work on that data. So again, if you sell data, if you sell basic reporting, all you're selling is work. And nobody likes to buy work. Or if they do, it's a commodity and it's a very low margin business. Now, if I sell you a financial outcome, as you use my analytics, I'm saving you $1 million, then you're into the money making. And you can price against that value. You can do value-based pricing, partnership, and that's what we see in the monetization market. And to do that, you need a platform like Sisense to embed and infuse those analytics in commercially offerings, whether they are services or products, so that they are embedded in the workflow at point of decision and people make money. So they generate financial outcomes for your customer and you get paid for those financial outcomes. So let me tell you stories in healthcare. I'll go through the 3 pillars that I think define the type of outcomes you find in healthcare. In every industry would be different. I work across industries. Today I'm going to focus on healthcare. So the main one, the most obvious to all of us, you should help to drive clinical outcomes. And so here is the type of solution we had built when we were at GE Healthcare. We would look at all the data across all the monitors, which gives the vital signs of all the patients in the hospital. And before that, what we were doing is we're selling the equipment. Here is the equipment to get those vital signs. Then we started saying, hold on, what if we looked at a command center, connect all that data together and present to the care team a prioritization workflow. I'm gonna tell the nurses, the care team, which patients need my attention next. So as opposed to go from room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and start again, maybe I need to go to patient number 5 right now because the vital signs are showing a risk of an adverse event in the next 4 hours. And if I do just that, now I've optimized the time of the care team and I've optimized the clinical outcome. And so we sold that as a bundle on top of the monitors, and it did become a new revenue stream. What was interesting though is the value proposition was not the clinical outcomes to do the commercial transaction, was the financial outcome associated to that clinical outcome. It was the one that says, if you can move patients efficiently between critical bed, intensive care unit beds, and recovery bed or normal beds, you'll save about $16,000 a day per bed, because a high intensive care unit bed is $18,000 a day to run, and a normal bed is just $2,000. So being efficient at that movement between critical care and normal care was a secondary value proposition which actually used to do monetization. So even though it was a clinical outcome, we've commercialized it as a financial outcome. The second one is an operational outcome. So you look at workflows into a hospital, and the most expensive workflow, or one of the most 2 expensive workflows, one would be the cardiology workflows, the other one would be the imaging workflow. So you get a patient in, you get a scan, you get a read on that scan, and then you decide on a care plan. And so what we saw is that the data from those equipments, plus combined with the data from the EMR, the patient record system in the hospital, drove amazing insights that drove tremendous operational efficiency. You could use more your equipment and shift from 2 patients an hour on the CT scan to 2.5 patients an hour. And that effectiveness would drive more patients, give access to more care, and eventually drive savings, because those equipments are multi-million equipments. Optimizing your protocols, optimizing your schedules, making sure you have no revenue leakage as you do your referral for readings outside of the hospitals, and so. And so what was needed to solve for imaging analytics was an innovation framework where we can go after each of those outcomes one by one. And we ended up creating a suite of applications that specifically solve for all of those on the Sisense platform. So I didn't say that, but at G Healthcare, I was a Sisense customer and got me, I like the platform enough to become a Sisense employee. But the point is, we had a framework where technology was not the problem, domain expertise was not the problem, data was not the problem. I had all of those components. So all we cared about was what can we solve for? And we knew that if we created value, we could charge for that value. The last example, a bit more obvious, similar to what we had on the previous work stream on financial services. There's a huge component of finance in healthcare as well. And that's in the revenue cycle management space. On this one, what we try to do is, can I optimize the financial flows between the payer, the provider, and the patient? And so things like a denied claim. So the hospital submit a claim on your behalf. The insurance says, no, I'm missing a comma somewhere. It goes back and forth 2-3 times. And every time you're losing $100 in the process. And the patient is not getting the cash, and the hospital is not getting paid, and the insurance is not happy because they still have the work to drive. So what we created here was a solution to flag, using the analytics, which claims are likely to be denied, which one are not likely, less likely to be denied. So we could fix a good chunk of those before they actually were sent, and so they would not come back. That drove literally tens of millions of savings to some of the very large revenue cycle management healthcare systems. And so what I wanted to show by those 3 examples is technology was never what we would go and lead the discussion with. Data was actually very limited in the discussion. It was exclusively centered on the outcome. If you use it, how much money you're going to save, how much better you're going to be to take care of your patient, or how much more efficient will you be in delivering those outcomes? And by the way, if you're successful, I'd be happy to take a share. And so that's why we as a company, we created that platform that allows you to do just that. And we help hundreds of customers and have thousands of discussions almost monthly on what is it that we can do to create incremental value to our different markets, not just in healthcare, in all the industries we're going to talk about today. And what we figured out is not about a good dashboard. Dashboard is one way to consume data. It's really the idea that as I'm about to make that decision, can you give me more context? Can you make me more intelligent in making that decision? So it could be a notification, it could be a widget at the right place, but that's really infusing the analytics within the workflow that is driving the most efficiency towards a specific business outcome. So I'm super excited to be part of this conference because I'm hearing a lot of those themes. And Kate, if you want to come back, if there's some questions that I could get to.
Kate is back. You say my name and I'll hop back in, Charles. I felt myself just standing here watching and nodding with everything you were saying, Charles. Thank you so much for that great presentation. We have time for 2 comments and a question. So I'm going to go ahead and bring those up. First comment here is from Randy Bean, and he's saying that data leaders will be the next generation CEOs. I love it. Comment here from Kimberly. She's saying this is the truth. All data analysis boils down to increased revenue or decreased costs. If you can't show that, you cannot show the value of data analysis.
Kimberly, I cannot agree more.
Yeah.
When I look and assess, so I audit many analytics offerings. The first and only questions almost is there a dollar sign or a euro sign or a pound sign on the landing page? Because it's not, you're not in the right discussion. You're not quantifying the outcome.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then we'll end off with this question here from Petrie. He's saying about this chief data officer thing. Do you see it as a P&L function or a cost function? this question is for everyone, but he wants to know your thoughts on it.
So I would almost argue there's two chief data officer, but there should be one role. There's two roles, but there's only one. It could be done by one person. One is to serve your internal stakeholders, and in that respect, the data governance, data compliance, data literacy, creating a data as a muscle for internal consumption is more of a cost center. But I personally see it as a P&L, because it is everybody else is doing the same thing, and if you can help them on that journey, then you should be able to monetize it. So I do believe a CDO should have P&L targets, should be measured on revenue, and use that revenue to reinvest into more advanced analytics and artificial intelligence and doing more for their internal stakeholders. It's a P&L. It was a P&L at GE Healthcare. It was the first time we did that, and it's a P&L for many companies that we advise.
For successful companies, right, Charles?
Yeah.
That's.
I mean, I'm not gonna go too far, but if you don't try, you're just leaving money on the table. It's a crime. There's a cost of doing nothing that is much greater than a cost of doing it or trying it.
Right.
You've got the data, every one of you. You've got the domain expertise, and you have access to great technology. So there's no excuse. You have to try.
Awesome. Well, Charles, thank you so much for your time here today. We're going to keep this data party moving. Really, really great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
All right, we're going to go ahead and bring up our two speakers, actually. They are going to do this as a team. I'm super excited to introduce them. I'll start with Professor Shafi Ahmed. He is an award-winning cancer surgeon at the Royal London Hospital. And he's going to talk about, does MD stand for more data? So let me introduce Professor Shafi Ahmed first. As I mentioned, he's a multi-award-winning cancer surgeon, works at the Royal London Hospital. He is a member of the NHS Assembly, advising the government on the NHS long-term plan. He was awarded the Future NHS Award by members of Parliament in 2018. He was also the Asian Star in the UK Tech in 2018. He's won the Silver Scalpel as the Best National Trainer in Surgery in 2015 and has been given the accolades of World's Most Watched Surgeon as he streamed live operations using Google Glass, virtual reality, social media, and on national television on Operation Live. He is a 3-time TEDx and international speaker, having delivered over 250 keynotes in over 30 countries. He will be joined here on stage with Mr. John Nasta. He's the founder of Nasta Lab, a digital health think tank recognized globally for an inspired vision of transformation. He's currently ranked as one of the leading global influencers in medical innovation and technology, and well established as one of the top global strategic and creative thinkers. He's also one of the most popular speakers around the globe, presenting his vibrant and insightful perspective on the future of innovation. His focus is on guiding companies, NGOs, and governments through the dynamics of exponential change and the diffusion of innovation into complex systems. He's also a member of the Google Health Advisory Board. All right, we are going to go ahead and bring them both up on stage. Professor Shafi Ahmed, John Nasta, welcome to
here we are.
The DATAcated Conference. Hello, there you are. I'm going to stop wasting time. I'm going to hop off the stage here, and I'll be back in about 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, okay.
Thanks for the t-shirt, Kate. Hope we did you proud.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you.
Well, first of all, Shafi, it's always unfair to be on stage with you because your credentials are so good. I think I'm gonna have to lie more on mine. So here's my thought is that I think I'm gonna stick with the D word, and everything I'm gonna talk about today has to begin with the letter D. And I want to start with this, of course, going to the notion of data, but well, as I look at clinical medicine, what's going on, there are other precursors to this. And I want to discuss that with you a little bit, because I think that ultimately what we're seeing is the digitization. So we kind of start there, that we're digitizing so many things in clinical medicine, from digitizing an arterial pulse tracing in the operating room, to digitizing heart sounds, to carrying it down that line. And that takes us to the other Ds that I want to kind of put in perspective for our audience. Not making this super technical, but digitization leads to demonetization. So now I don't need all that big, heavy equipment. I can do it virtually or anywhere. And the demonetization leads to the dematerialization. And that dynamic, I think, is what you're doing. So the final D in this construct is that what that gives us is the unique opportunity to actually democratize healthcare. So I want to talk about that a little bit. In your experience as a clinician, relying on human touch and relying on so many fundamental things, how is digitization and demonetization and all that stuff really making an impact in the operating room? Because that's where I see a lot of it happening.
Yeah, John, I think let's put it into context. We'll talk about my own special surgery in a moment and how we're changing the face of surgery using data. I think where we're living at the moment with the pandemic coming through this entire year, we're seeing data being used much in a much more broader sense. That means access to patient records, electronic health records. We're seeing more data being shared. That absolutely has conversation around confidentiality and data sharing agreements, etc. And that's another conversation for another day, I guess. That's all about the kind of the remoteness of patients. We've seen telemedicine coming in, doing remote consultations taken off by 8,000% or so the last few months. That also helps us manage those patients with chronic disease better. For example, in the NHS in the UK, 60% of all the resources are actually used to manage patients with chronic disease. And it's been inefficient use of time and resource. Now we're seeing diabetics, COPD patients, asthma patients being managed in the community. And now we're seeing the data being shared, for example. John, we have access to a lot of data, biological data. We both got the iWatch 6, which measures your oxygen levels and your ECG, giving you valuable data in real time. I've got this new blood pressure little machine now, gadget, continuous blood pressure monitored 24 hours a day. So now we're seeing more and more data being acquired in real time. We have garments now that be able to embed some of these parameters. And so, we talk about the wearables, the injectables, the ingestibles, electronic health records, massive data, and genomic data, of course, became more affordable. I just want to show you one thing very quickly, Joe, if I may.
Yeah.
I was given this today. This is, which you can see this. This is the pill cam. I've just opened for the first time. So this is a camera. You've got a camera. You get this flashing away, which you can swallow, which takes images, real-time images, and you can use data analytics to reconstitute the colon, the bowel, for example, to look at lesions. Now, we're just launching this for bowel cancer screening, rather than having colonoscopies, for example. So as this gives you more and more data, you have to screen going forward. And imagine connecting this with 5G technology, real-time monitoring of people in real time across the world. So that's the value of data being not just on its own, but with other technologies that we call exponential, John.
So interesting. I just read today that the guidelines are being changed in the United States for earlier detection of colon and rectal cancer down to age 40 for first screening.
Great.
So that's great, but we know that everybody is non-compliant with colonoscopies.
Yes.
But by swallowing this pill is really interesting. So again, the premise to my discussion here is that you still have to digitize the darn thing.
Yes.
Right? You need that camera, and you're making, look at the sigmoidoscope, or the scope that's used now. It's a big thing. This is something you literally swallow. So I think that's really interesting. But Shafi, here's my concern, and it goes back to data. Is data a four-letter word in clinical medicine today? Is there just too much darn data? Do I have to bring my genomic information to the doctor? And when I do, he or she's going to get angry at me. Like, how do you put that in perspective?
So the system's not ready to understand what that all means, John. It's work in progress. Mm-hmm. What we do now is understanding what personalization means, what precise medicine means. We've got these terms that have been used for the last few years, is becoming much more mature in our understanding. I think these small steps. Obviously, if you look at the entire health ecosystem, we need to understand what it means, analyze it. Also, it'll be about patient empowerment, John, having data at your fingertips. So, for example, just over the last few days, NHS app on my phone now has my vaccine data entered in all my data. So I can now use that as my vaccine passport. So dragging valuable data that's relevant going forward and having practical solutions to society at large. So we are seeing real-time applications of some of these, but with all of this data, it's going to be time taken. What we need is good data scientists, good data analysts working together in collaboration with the engineers, with software engineers, with computer analysts to figure out what that can look like in the future. So I think it's really promising. And I'm really excited by what we can do with that as we go forward. And just last thing about surgery, you mentioned earlier, John, my own specialty has been transformed. The OR has been archaic in the way we perform surgery, with crude outcomes of 30-day mortality rates or morbidity. Now we're seeing computer vision. We're seeing real-time analytics during the operation for laparoscopic surgery, for example. So you can see structures using computer vision and data analysis. Also, the outcomes can be measured more accurately. So soon we'll be able to really be much more precise in determining the outcomes of the operation and looking at the performances of a team and individual surgeons, which is much more valuable, John, than before.
I'm gonna finagle my way to the patient a little bit, but before we get there, I'm gonna have my show and tell too, which I think is an example of what is really going on. That not only we have PillCam, and again, dematerialization, making it small, but we have this little gizmo that I can hold in my hands, and that takes my EKG. And another similar device is what we'd probably never guessed, that this is a stethoscope. And I put it on my chest, and the stethoscope tracks heart sounds, and it also tracks the EKG and superimposes both of them. And what that does, it creates something called a systolic time interval, and it allows you to measure something as specific as cardiac contractility. In other words, how well your heart is squeezing. The point I'm making here is that we've gone from this EKG machine, and this stethoscope, which, the use of the stethoscope, Shafi would know this. The role of the stethoscope is to identify the doctor in the room, right? Because it's hung over their neck. But now it's this freaky thing. But look where it lives now. It doesn't live in the domain of the cardiologist or in the domain of just the physician. It's the patient who buys this on Amazon today. And it's the patient who very well may use this device to measure heart failure while he or she is at home. So Shafi, I want to talk about, the emergence of data and all this stuff, but how do the patients fit into that? Is the patient the arbiter of the data now? Is the patient the collector of the data? And how important is their role in this new clinical dynamic?
That was a great question, and you're absolutely right. We often don't put patients at the center of medicine, and we've struggled with that for many years. I think with the future, with data and these technologies, I think there'd be a tendency to involve the patient more, because they have to. Because it's about understanding what data you can collect safely, getting their consent for that process, ensure they understand what it means, and having at their fingertips. If we're moving away from sick care to well care, maintaining well-being, John, in the community, then that only means the patient has more empowered with their own data sets to ensure they're complying or adhering to medicines or their therapies, for example. So I do see a move away from the hierarchical method of medicine, where we know best and this is what you have to do, to much more collaborative effort with the patient and a kind of a joint conversation. I am seeing that happen much more regularly, John, which I think is a good thing. A patient needs to be in control of their own destiny and their medical therapists.
That's interesting. You mentioned telemedicine, and during COVID, telemedicine peaked. It went up. But what I'm seeing is telemedicine actually going down now. In some scenarios, it's almost returning to February, March baseline. And I'm curious, I have my theories about that. What's going on, Shafi? Do you think who's driving telemedicine? The patient, the doctor? Who is the obstacle? What are some of the things? I'll let you go first, then I'll kind of throw out some of my insights around this, because I think it's important.
Yeah, sure. I remember you sharing that bit of data on social media around the fact that it went up really quickly initially, and then it came down rapidly. So the first thing was, when we came into the pandemic, we were forced to do telemedicine. It wasn't a choice. We had to do it. Therefore, utilization went up much more than expected. Then as you go back to face-to-face, as you open up, obviously you want to do more face-to-face. It's our comfort zone. You get a better, I guess, for certain patients it's much better. And so some people would revert back to normal, back to type, right? The not new normal, but the old normal, John, that we're trying to get rid of. So that was going to be inevitable at some decline. The question is how to make it stick to a certain level to ensure that we judge it correctly. The patients who need telemedicine get it because it's at their convenience, more appropriate. Others who don't need to be seen and can be seen directly, it's okay. So I think now it's about the balance, getting it right. And I think it will swing one way and then back again.
Yeah.
And we find a happy medium over a medium to long term, John.
You know, one of my observations is that as much as I like to talk about this crazy gizmo to take your EKG, you know, and the fact that you can buy it for $89 US on Amazon, you know, this is not an access problem. This is readily available to many patients. It's still not seen as a tool to be used during telemedicine in many instances. And my point is, if you go back 5-10 years ago when we were, you know, messing around with the web, maybe 20 years ago, the early web was not a very friendly place to be. It was hard to navigate. You know, it didn't have a very good user experience. Then what happened is that we found that we can actually create something that is dynamic, and that user experience, the UX, emerge as a powerful tool to not only drive functionality, but engagement. So I'm on this website and I like it. I'm tooling around. I think that telemedicine today is a meager transfer. We've basically taken the office visit and pushed it to a Zoom call. And there's not much technological sophistication. You know, we need to create a clinical experience that allows us to leverage technology like like maybe a stethoscope, maybe an otoscope. You know, maybe there's certain things that we can use. So for me, I think that we need to move to telemedicine 2.0 or 3.0, and I don't think that's going to be an easy path forward.
No, and I think you picked up a few points there. Okay, you can see somebody face to face. What about the basic observations you do routinely as a checkup as they come to the hospital? I think that is going to be a key part of it. And the other thing that we struggle with always for the data scientists out there is interoperability. It's the one thing that comes up again and again and again. Yeah. Old legacy system trying to connect with new systems. We're using electronic health records like CERN and Epic and trying to force things to merge together. So we struggled with interoperability.
So let me stop you there, Shaf, because I want you to explain that to the group a little bit, because a lot of the people listening to us are not physicians. They're not clinicians. So what does interoperability mean? You know, if I'm a patient or a clinician, you know, take a step back on that.
I guess that if you look at the basic tenet, it's electronic health record for patients. And the question is, if you add some data, say you want to use your machine that you've got there, for example, the measures the ECG, and you want to connect that into electronic health record. How does that connect? What's the API look like? How do you make it easy so that people can look at it, immediately enjoy it? Or a blood pressure cuff, for example, or another system from pathology to get results in, for example, or the PAS system for X-rays. How do you connect all those together to make it easy for someone to navigate? And that's what interoperability means. And obviously what we've done is we kept building on systems, building, but actually it's finding it hard for legacy systems to connect to future kind of pathways. And I thought always sometimes the EHR isn't fit for purpose. We change it all, get a new one in to connect properly for the future. Now that would take a bold person.
That's great. That's great.
With those systems.
Shafi, I want to just jump on one other topic, and I know Kate is back up on with us. Is our human ability to inculcate, to assimilate data and knowledge into our lives, whether we're students or whether we're physicians, is that ever going to be able to keep up with technology? I mean, it seems to me technology is advancing faster than our human ability to absorb it. So that's a lose situation to me. I mean, what are your insights?
We can turn on its head, John. Of course, we can't have all the knowledge in the world. We've got Google search, that's much more powerful. We've got to be more smarter. I'll bring this information in to your handheld to summarize things. You know, even public papers and research papers, for example, can be used now using data scientists to bring in the correct data for you and the correct answers and conclusions. So I think it's an advantage to have this amazing data and these clever data scientists to bring it to us, for example.
I think that, and just my final point in closing here is that I think there's a psychological component to this, because when we speak to physicians, they are often identified as the smartest person in the room. It's just the hierarchy of medicine. The doctor is smart. And one point is that as we have collaborative care, I think that not only is it the doctor working with the patient, working with the technician, working with the family, but that collaborative care must include technology. It must include the computer. And I think it's going to flip doctors out when they begin to understand that the smartest person in the room isn't the person, but is the technology.
I'm sure you're right, John.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. And I apologize for interrupting. I just want to make sure we do take a couple of questions from the live audience.
Sure.
The chat has been exploding with just the level of speakers that we're having on our show today. And thank you so much for giving that talk. I'll start off with a question from Alyssa here. She's asking, in 5 years, how do you see the use of data will change the way healthcare is delivered?
Shafi, I'll let you go first because you're a real doctor. I only pretend that I'm one.
So no, I think it'll be obviously more important. I think data will be the heart of patient engagement. I think they will be using, we talked about this personalized approach to medicine or precision medicine, so that each individual gets to use their own data to understand the therapies or treatment that might be required, for example. So we're bringing individualized medicine into practice. We're already seeing it now. In 5 years' time, it'll be much more mature, where you can actually get treatment that you require. And I think the other thing I said before is about sharing data. Patients will access their own data from remote places on their smartphone and their computer, and we'll see much better engagement with that data sharing agreements that we need to have with our patients.
I agree. I think that personalized care, customized care is definitely a point in the continuum, but I want to extend that curve out farther because it is my desire that personalized care become obsolete, that we don't need it. And this is my premise, is that I think that early detection and an appropriate analysis of data, blood glucose, weight, the back of your eye, all sorts of kooky things will actually get us to a point where we can get to stage 0, where we can get to an earlier path. Now, my mom and my grandmom always told me, eat your vegetables because it'll keep you healthy. I believe that the path to prevention is actually a technology-based path where early detection and disease detection allows us to get to a place where personalized therapy is going to be trumped because we can eliminate disease before it becomes clinically or systemically relevant.
John, when you said you want to move away from personal care, at first I was like, wait, what? And then now I get it. Yes, prevention.
Yeah, I don't want the disease in the first place, Kate.
Yes.
I don't want to customize therapy for my heart attack. My God,
Absolutely.
That's barbaric. I want to prevent it from ever happening.
Yes, great point. And I also really love the kind of show and tell that you guys have brought to the conference. We do have several questions on some of the gadgets that you were sharing. So there's a question here from Bharat. This is for Professor Shafi. He's saying the pill cam is mind-blowing as a less invasive diagnostic method. However, how much is it reliable compared to an actual colonoscopy with respect to the quality of digitization and data?
Yeah, really good question. Thanks for that. Look, I think if you look at what we're doing at the moment for colonoscopy, we're seeing new technology using AI. For example, Medtronic have got the GI Genius. So as you do the colonoscopy, it sits with you on a little monitor and it analyzes sort of for polyps and small lesions. And it's doing very well, and that will get better and better as more data sources are acquired over the course of years. So we're really using AI. Now imagine using that same technology now into a pill cam. So as you swallow the pill cam, use that same knowledge from the colonoscopy and like GI Genius or something, and looking at data through the colon, analyzing it. So actually, it could be just as good. I think that, of course, the other thing about having these small cameras and things, it takes a risk of perforation, damage, pain, anesthesia, sedation, inpatient stay, all expenses and risk to the patient. So the balance is, you might miss a few small lesions. It's absolutely entirely possible. But the balance of risk versus benefit is going to be in the favor of a pill cam. So I think that's the judgment.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. And it goes back to data. It comes back to data. And the example I'm going to use has nothing to do with medicine. Let's talk about Tesla. I mean, because the magic of Tesla is the accumulated data that makes the car smarter and smarter and smarter. That's really the market advantage. That's by Google bought Fitbit, not because of the technology. They bought it because of the data. And as PillCam gets used and used and used, we're going to be able to optimize those algorithms. So to me, I mean, that's a really, really interesting dynamic. Now, here's the other side of that coin. We don't have to make everything equally accurate. You know, when we make a stethoscope, it's going to be different than the stethoscope the cardiology uses. And these different levels will suit an appropriate need. So maybe I will get a pill colonoscopy every 5 years from the time of 20. because it's inexpensive and easy. That modality has to be looked at completely differently than that one Uber colonoscopy at age 50 where I need to find that darn polyp, and the downside to PillCam is that you have no intervention, that if I see a polyp, I can't remove it.
Sure.
But it creates a new clinical dynamic. It changes the game fundamentally. And I think that's why it's so exciting.
Absolutely. And we have probably 100 or 200 questions that are just flying at you guys. And unfortunately, we are
John Nasta at John Nasta on Twitter. And Shafi, you are at Shafi
Ahmed 5 or LinkedIn, whatever. I'm happy to answer the question.
Or LinkedIn. We're live streaming on LinkedIn, so you can find Professor Shafi Ahmed and John Nasta on LinkedIn. They love questions, clearly, so go ahead and send them direct messages. Whether or not they'll have time, I'm not sure to respond. But guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Really, really great discussion. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Thanks, Kate. Right. Take care.
Bye. All right, before we bring up our very next speaker, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsor, RapidMiner.
The team here at RapidMiner wanted to take this opportunity to thank Kate and the DATAcated community for having us. If you're not familiar with RapidMiner, our mission is to reinvent enterprise AI so that anyone has the power to positively shape the future. We deliver on this promise through an end-to-end data science and machine learning platform that provides depth for data scientists and is simplified for everyone else. If you've ever wondered how to make the best beer in the world even better, or how to improve 1,000 years of craftsmanship with digitization, we'd like to invite you to join our session with Martin Schmitz, Head of Data Science Services at RapidMiner, in the food and beverage section tomorrow. We work on use cases like this with organizations across the globe in all industries. Learn more about our platform and process at rapidminer.com.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Yes, you're going to hear from RapidMiner tomorrow. They're going to talk about beer and AI. But for now, we're going to stick with healthcare for today's session. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker here. We've got John K. Thompson. He is the Global Head of Advanced Analytics at AI, at CSL Behring. And he's going to talk to us about analytics in pharma. We'll discuss patients, productivity, and price. John is an international technology executive with over 30 years of experience in the business intelligence and advanced analytics fields. Currently, John is responsible for the global advanced analytics and artificial intelligence team and efforts at CSL. John is the author of the new book, Analytics Teams, Leveraging Analytics and Artificial Intelligence for Business Improvement. And actually, on that note, I want to let you guys know we are doing a giveaway of John's book. So before I bring him up on stage, we're giving away 3 copies of Building Analytics Teams during his session. So all you have to do in order to enter the raffle for this is just type the word #packed in the comments. I'll put it in the banner below so you kind of can see the instructions. Definitely listen to John's presentation. As you're listening, just type in #packed so you can enter the raffle to win. We're going to announce winners at the end of John's presentation. All right, John, I've taken up enough of your time. Welcome to the DATAcated Conference. Welcome back, actually. You've spoken before. So Thank you for coming back here.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks for inviting me. I have my shirt, but I actually had DATAcated tattooed on my chest. So I'm going to take my shirt off. And
no, John, we're good. We're good. We believe that you've done that. So I'm going to go ahead and hop off the virtual stage here and let you take it away.
Thanks, Kate. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. Always exciting to be back with the DATAcated group and the DATAcated audience and the sponsors. Great part of our community, and I'm excited to be here. I'm going to talk about analytics in pharma. There is some things that have happened over the last few weeks that I'd like to discuss that were beyond patients, price, and the other P. I can't remember what it was in the title. I've been looking at some work that has been done in computation in the area of analytics and computational biology. There's a few companies out there that are starting to do drug discovery, not from a wet lab perspective or an R&D compound perspective, but from a computational perspective. This one company is looking at the cause of, I think it's 2 different types of breast cancer that to this point have been considered pretty much untreatable. And if these diagnoses are given, it's a really sad day for the patient. So what they found is that when you're comparing the genomic level information of patients, they're finding out that these cancers are caused by a constellation of genes working together. And it's a cascade of effects that culminates in this cancer. So we're at a point now where we can start to look at causes of diseases as computational models. We are now taking that forward. This is not a company I work with or that I'm affiliated with, but they are taking it forward and coming up with combinations of known drugs that are then being tested in animal trials right now, and they're finding that it's effective. So the hope is that these known drugs will be able to work on these untreatable cancers, and we will be able to do 90% of the work in a computational environment, which is amazing. So, we just need time on a computer and smart people doing the math and the data and the analytics, and we're going to make some really impressive strides in medicine here in the coming future, in the very near future. So that's one thing I wanted to talk about, and happy to answer any questions about that. Another thing that I'm really excited about is something that I think Gartner is referring to as synthetic data. There's a couple things going on in this area. One thing that I am doing at my day job at CSL. CSL is a $10 billion biopharma company, and we operate in the plasma space. So it's kind of a niche marketplace, an unusual marketplace. Most people in the United States are aware of blood donation. Much less people are aware of plasma donation. So there's not a lot of information in the general marketplace from IRI or Nielsen or Gartner or other people about how the plasma marketplace operates. We've been looking at a range of different data sets, external data sets, and we're being able to bring together a number of those data sets and synthesize that data. That's the word synthetic data, that's where it comes from. Bring that together and be able to forecast and project what's going on in the market. So it's a really interesting tool for us to understand our operations, our competitors' operations, the market in general, the broader donor market, so we can understand how we can serve that donor market better and help them with their health. So synthetic data is something that you're going to hear more and more about. Historically, we've been looking at data that's already exists. We all have heard about image recognition, the use of 1 million photographs of school buses, at least school buses in the United States as we think of them, those big yellow truck-like vehicles that go around and pick up the kids, take them to school, bring them home, hopefully safely every day. But you put them on their nose, you put them on their back, you flip them over, you put them sideways, you photograph them from the front, from the back, from the side, from the top, and you train these models on images. And that's what a lot of people think about machine learning and AI, is it's a large model trained on a monolithic set of existing data. And that for the most part is true. But in healthcare, we're starting to look at different types of data that may have a part of the problem here, a part of the problem here, part of the problem here, part of the problem here. We shove those together and we end up with an ensemble picture of the real world. And some of that is happening in the market, like I talked about, what we're doing in my team. And another initiative that I've been talking about that it's not in play at CSL, it's kind of outside CSL, like the first example that I talked about, but it is in the healthcare pharma industry, is using synthetic data about the human body for clinical trials. I've been talking about this for a couple years now with George Church at Harvard, where George and his team have been doing some really intriguing things around genetics and different kinds of information about transcription, sequencing, a wide range of really intriguing initiatives going on there in his lab. But George also has a model of the human blood system. So we have been talking about taking that model and probably augmenting it and extending it. So as many of us know, the clinical trial process goes from you try some things in the lab, see if it works, you move into lab, wetware tests, you move into animal testing, you move into human testing. There's a number of levels of human testing, of course, and you finally get to a point of where you have an approved drug. Great, thank you. So the idea is that we take this data, we take these objects, these synthetic people, if you'd like to say that, if that doesn't creep you out too much. And as you go through the clinical trial process, and we move from successful animal trials, but before we move to human trials, we insert a new step, a new computational step, where we test the biologics or the compounds or the chemicals or the drugs, however you want to say it, on these synthetic people. And we test it millions and millions of times across many, many different types of people. These objects that emulate and simulate women, simulate men, different races, different ages, different weights, different biologies, different blood types, things like that. So we can actually, if this really works, it does seem like it could, we could actually test every permutation of the human condition with every permutation of every possible drug that we think might work. So it's impossible to do that in a clinical trial. I mean, it would just take forever to do it, and you probably couldn't even recruit that diverse of a population to do it anyway. But that is something that we've talked about. It's on the horizon. It's going to be difficult to do, but I think it can be done, and I think it will work. So that's a really interesting thing to do. One of the other projects that I've been working on as well in my day job is on undiagnosed patients. CSL works and delivers plasma-based therapies for rare diseases. And sometimes those rare diseases aren't very well understood by the doctor population or the doctors that are seeing these patients. They don't present as something immediate and dangerous like a heart attack. They also often present in very confusing ways. So we've been working on bringing together, again, a theme in my presentation, bringing together a number of different data sets so we can identify people who are moving through their diagnostic journey but have not been diagnosed in a confirmed way, that they probably, with all likelihood, have these conditions, but no doctor has actually diagnosed them and given them a code and said, you have primary immunodeficiency disease, or you have hereditary angioedema, or something like that. So we've been very excited in my team to find, in one case, we found 16,000 people that probably have one of these conditions but don't know it. So if you have one of these undiagnosed conditions and you've been going to the doctor for multiple years, wondering what's going on with you, I think we can help.
Awesome. John, hope I didn't cut you off. I always worry about jumping up on stage if I throw people off. I just wanted to let you know we're getting close to time, and I want to make sure we do the giveaway and take at least one question. So I'm going to share my screen for the giveaway so people can actually see who the winners are. If you're just joining us, we're giving away 3 of John's books, and I'll show them to you here again. Here they are. So we've got 3 of the Building Analytics Teams books. We're going to select the winner. So we have this cool StreamYard tool here where we have 109 entries, and I will make the first drawing now, and then John, I'll ask you a question. So let's go ahead and draw the first winner. If you want to participate in the next drawing, just type #packed, and you can add your name to the draws. So let's see. The first winner is Anand Mohan. Oh, I love that picture. Join us for YouTube. Thank you so much, Anand. Congratulations. Great book. I read John's book. We will take one question here before we do the next drawing. So the question here is from Ray, and he's asking, what impact will this computational approach have on time to market? There's still a long path of clinical trials. Is that right?
There is a long path in clinical trials, Ray. Great question. Thank you for asking it. There is a long path, but we now know, that it can go faster. The COVID vaccines obviously have gone through that path much faster than any other drugs that we've seen in our lifetime. So we're looking for ways to accelerate that process, and so are all the world regulatory bodies like the FDA and others. So we're thinking that this will cut down on the time it takes to complete a clinical trial.
Great, thank you so much. All right, we're gonna go back and draw 2 more winners now. All right, we have 128 entries, now 130. All right, our second winner of the book is, I love how this flips through everybody.
It's kind of fun.
Oh, there we go. I thought, Christian Andrade, thank you so much for entering. You're our second winner, and we're gonna go ahead and draw this one last time so we can get our third winner of the book. And if you have not read the book, I highly encourage you to go to Amazon or go to Pact and check them out. All right, our very final winner here is, drum roll, Diego. Congratulations, Diego. Thank you so much for joining and for playing our StreamYard game here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my screen off. John, any final thoughts before we part ways?
It's always great to be with you, Kate. Your events are always so much fun and well attended and truly well run. So thank you for inviting me, and good luck with the rest of the day and for tomorrow as well. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and, there we go, remove you. All right, that actually wrapped up our healthcare talks. We're going to go ahead and move on to our last industry of the day, and we're going to talk about energy. I know somebody mentioned in the comments that time is flying today. I agree with you. I think time is flying really, really fast. I'm going to go ahead and bring up our very next speaker here, Sweta Kotha. She's a data scientist at TIPCO, and she's going to talk to us about renewed energy, innovating with data and machine learning in energy. The volume and variety of data are particular challenges in the energy industry. Sweta Kotha, a data scientist at TIPCO, will share real-world use cases for AI in oil and gas and renewables. She's going to tell us how she's addressed these challenges. She'll highlight practical approaches in the AI lifecycle, from data scalability to predictive insights. Sweta studied statistics and machine learning at Carnegie Mellon University, and her analytics experience in other industries span natural language processing and biostatistics. All right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Sweta up on our virtual stage here. Hello, welcome to the DATAcated Conference, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and remove myself from the stage and let you take this away.
Awesome. Can you see my screen up?
Yep, we can see the screen.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So again, I'm very excited to kick off the energy section of this conference. And today specifically, I want to show and tell the story of a data science project in renewable energy. And today I'm going to be working with data from the Electrical Reliability Council of Texas and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And again, we're going to bring together intuitive visualizations and complex analytics. But again, since I'm kicking off the energy section of this conference, I did want to give an overview of the industry itself. So oil and gas development are really at the forefront of the energy industry. The volume and variety of data that needs to be constantly assessed and monitored in oil and gas poses challenges at various stages in development. So this ranges from predicting where to drill, tracking real-time drilling, and then monitoring wells once they're created. So you can imagine without a doubt that having analytics and AI tools helps address many of these data challenges. And altogether, that's really where TIPCO comes into play. So we've had success working with customers in the energy industry because of our hyperconverged products like TIPCO Data Virtualization, TIPCO Data Science, and Spotfire. And again, my goal today is to really show how we've used some of these products to create a complete analytics project, as well as a highly interactive dashboard. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into a renewable energy demo. So this demo is going to aggregate data from several sources. It's going to highlight visuals in both time series and geospatial data. And it's going to use time series and machine learning modeling to predict future energy or power production. Now, a little bit about the actual story at hand. So infrastructure teams ranging from local farm owners to energy companies need to be able to track current farm conditions and predict future power production. So here we're looking at the last 10 years of weather data in Texas. Now, research shows that the performance of both solar panels and wind turbines depends collectively on weather conditions, geographic information, and equipment information. So as data scientists, our job really is to use this collective information to best predict future energy or power production. And as always, we start off by exploring our data at hand. So it's not really that surprising that many of our weather conditions or weather variables have statistically significant seasonal differences. So here we can see that wind speed tends to be higher in the spring compared to other months. And this is just one of the differences we hope that data science models can pick up on. And in addition, I also mentioned that one of the challenges in the energy industry is the variety of data as well as the messiness of data that we're working with. So the actual wind farms that we worked with didn't have weather information at their specific coordinates. So we used one of Spotfire's readily available data functions in order to interpolate conditions from a wind farm to a nearby, from a weather station to a nearby wind farm. So here what we're actually looking at is a heat map and contour lines of where wind speed is highest in red and also where it's lowest in green. And really what we've done is interpolated weather conditions from a weather station, which is represented here by a triangle, to a nearby wind farm, which is represented here by a circle. And what I've shown so far really is a very static exploration of our data, as well as what goes into data preparation. But keep in mind that our end goal is to design an interactive dashboard for both solar and wind farm planners and owners. So this entails being able to manipulate and visualize the site metadata, the weather information over both location and time at different granularities. And for solar, our main variable of interest is called global horizontal irradiance, or GHI. So if I were to just look at GHI in the last year of 2020, I can see that it's actually highest in the West as well as the Panhandle. So collectively, this makes up the Northwest of Texas. And just to give you an idea of like the different facets of the data, if I were to select two regions, the coast and Panhandle, which are on opposite sides of Texas, I can see that GHI tends to be higher in the Panhandle than the coast. I can also see that on average, there's more capacity and investment on the Panhandle sites than the coast. And altogether, it looks like a lot of these sites still happen to be in earlier stages of completion. So they're either just areas of interest or projects that are planned. And this again is showing the different facets of our data that we want to explore holistically. And likewise, we have very much a similar page for wind. So of course, our wind variables are different. And we also want to be very intentional about what we're visualizing on a map. So as I mentioned, for the wind data, we had to pull weather conditions from nearby weather stations, and we wanted to see those adjacent to the actual farm sites. And so far, what I've really been showing is an emphasis on the geospatial aspect of our data. And another thing that we were interested in is the time series data at hand. So solar and wind farm planners and owners must be able to track current weather conditions, but it's also important for them to be able to compare weather conditions too. So here, what we're actually looking at is solar GHI, and we're comparing it in the year of 2020 across different months. And you might ask, why is this important for any type of planner? Well, it shows them, for example, that GHI is maybe more consistent in the month of April than it was in the month of May. And likewise, farm owners know that summer is when solar production is highest. So it's important for them to be able to compare maybe like a certain season's output against previous years. So it looks like solar GHI was highest in the year of 2020 compared to the previous years by a little bit. And we want any data science models we construct to be able to pick up on long-term changes in weather and as well as seasonal differences in weather. And overall, this time series aspect of our data just adds another layer of complexity to the existing variety of data that we're working with, as well as a spatial layer. And so far, what I've really shown is the historical data that we have. But keep in mind that for future predictions, or for planning, we do need to make future predictions. And this is really where we brought in TIBCO data science. in order to test a few different statistical and machine learning models to predict the future outcome of a weather variable, GHI, from a combination of other more readily available weather variables. So here we're actually testing 3 different types of models: a linear regression, a random forest, and gradient boosting regression. And using TIBCO data science, I can easily compare these models against one another. So it looks like the linear regression and the random forest actually perform best with the lowest mean absolute errors and also the lowest root mean squared errors. If I were to dive more deeply into the random forest, I can also see the variable importance. So it looks like solar zenith angle and temperature are the most important variables in the model for the model to learn, again, for predicting GHI. And lastly, I thought it was also interesting to mention that we use TIBCO data science in order to aggregate all of our data. So this goes back to the volume challenge that I mentioned at the beginning. Our solar data set alone pulled from over 5 different sources, and we needed to quickly scale and process millions of rows of data before we could even visualize it. So again, this is another step of preparation that goes into this whole pipeline. And now that we have suitable models, it's important for us to be able to put them into context with our insights as well as existing data. So here, what we're looking at is both solar and wind data. We're looking at one solar variable and one wind variable at a time. So we're fixed on solar GHI and wind power. So the triangles here represent a wind site, and the circles represent a solar site. And the sizes of the variables actually indicate a higher value of that variable. And the colors also indicate something about the site status. So really, when you start looking at this map, what we're drawn to is actually the areas where the sizes of the points are larger. Again, what we know to be the northwest of Texas. And if I were to scroll down to this bottom of this page, we can also see the time series of the variables that I just mentioned, as well as any variables that we predicted or projected appear in a different color. So there's actually an integration between TIBCO data science and Spotfire that allows me to constantly refresh or remodel these results so I can see them as needed. And altogether, this was really, the map and subsequent filters really allow us to manipulate the spatiotemporal aspect of our data. So keep in mind that Spotfire's map layers, as well as map charts and feature layers, allow us to cleanly and compactly view many different spatial aspects of our data.
Awesome, Sweta. Awesome job. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was insightful and it was also really beautiful. I love data visualization, so this was a treat for me. Thank you so much for walking through all that. We've got plenty of comments and questions to go through here. We'll try to take 1 or 2 questions, comments telling you that people are loving the presentation. Thank you, Tom, for joining us. We have a question here from Kimberly, and she's asking, as power moves towards a balanced integrated grid, how important will iCommunications infrastructure and cybersecurity be for creating an effective and efficient grid? What are some growing trends that you see in the space for data professionals?
Yeah, I think that's just another layer of complexity that's going to be added to our data. So it's not in our demo right now, but you could imagine that we need to be working with other types of organizations and partners to bring in, cybersecurity data to add a layer of safety, and that that's important for putting out a full project in itself. And it also adds a complexity in this data science challenge.
Thank you for that. Seriously, so many comments about how great of a demo this is. I think people were looking for a demo at this conference and they finally got it. A question here from Michelle. She's asking, are there any solar wind farms that incorporate both? I think you were showing that with the triangles and the circles, right? Okay.
Yeah, so there's a region in the Panhandle actually that had both the triangles and circles overlapping. So you can clearly see very clearly off the bat where there's higher GHI as well as higher wind power.
Great, thank you so much. And we'll take one more question here from Svetlana, and she's asking, how much emphasis are you putting into cybersecurity, in this space?
Yeah, so once again, I guess that's an additional component of data that we can always bring in. And the data right now is also protected and proprietary. So that's something that we also keep in mind when we're handling it as data science and also presenting it.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, before we wrap up, I just wanted to make another announcement on TIBCO. We have a course that's coming out at the DATAcated Academy called Data to Dashboard with TIBCO Spotfire. So just wanted to do a quick shout out here because we've got Dr. Spotfire himself putting together that course, Neil Kanungo. So go ahead and check that out. You'll get an email if you register for the conference with more information on that. But Sweta, thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you for taking our questions.
Yep, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
All right, we're going to go ahead and keep this data party moving. We're going to bring up Mr. Jeffrey Can. He's a speaker, a trainer, an author, and he's going to talk about bits, bytes, and barrels, the digital transformation of oil and gas. So Jeffrey Can is an author, an educator, a podcaster, and he's an inspiring professional speaker. His passion is the oil and gas industry, essential to our modern industrial society, and it's imperative to exploit digital innovations as we slowly transition to new fuels. He has worked around the world, including Canada, the US, Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, China, Australia, and the Caribbean over a 35-year career. He teaches a seminar on digital oil and gas, produces a weekly article and podcast on digital issues and energy, and has published his first book, Bits, Bytes, and Barrels, the Digital Transformation of Oil and Gas. And in his free time, he speaks at conferences such as this. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Jeffrey up on the stage here. Hello, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, and there's the book. Awesome. Jeffrey, we can't hear you. I saw your.
Is that better?
Yes, much better. I'm going to welcome again. I'm going to hop off the virtual stage and let you take this away.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you, Katie and DATAcated for the opportunity to come and present to you today. So my role in life is to yell words of encouragement to the oil and gas industry about how digital tools will help them survive. It's a bit like how soccer moms yell at their kids from the sidelines. Yeah, it probably doesn't help, but it does make me feel better. Now, you may have also noticed the enthusiastic support I received this year from my new celebrity sidekick and microterrorist, COVID-19. The virus has made my job much easier because the old Kovmeister has pointed out all the flaws in an industry business model that's built on paper, is inherently manual and labor intense, and for safety reasons, insists that people work together in pairs very closely, a lot. My efforts also received an unexpected boost this year from some cyber criminals who attacked and shut down Colonial Pipeline. You know, I think ransomware is just Russia's way of teaching Americans about where their energy comes from. And you might be asking, where am I coming from? Well, this is where I live. Yes, this is British Columbia's beautiful wild west coast, and this is indeed the view from my front door. Those are indeed vintage 1950s de Havilland Beaver and Otter aircraft. You know, I never understood why de Havilland chose to name its planes after mammals that spend a goodly amount of time actually underwater. That's not where you find planes. I think the military does a much better job of naming things. They call their very friendly flying drones things like Reaper and Predator and Hawk and Blackbird. This is so much more reassuring. But you know, these old planes illustrate a hidden truth about fossil fuel engines and indeed the whole oil and gas industry. This industry is built to last. And my big idea for you today is this. Oil and gas runs on data. And that's because petroleum is toxic, it's flammable, it's explosive, it's corrosive, it's poisonous, and it's asphyxiating. Actually, you know, that sounds a bit like the kind of relationship you'd have with a really bad roommate than with the most precious commodity that actually rules the world. And that's because of petroleum's more dangerous features. That's why the industry runs entirely on data that it has about the stuff. It might not surprise you to learn that our energy industries are sitting on enormous quantities of data. Suncor, who are one of the largest producers of oil and gas in North America, once estimated that they use only 1/2 of 1% of all the data that they've collected. This is a bit like my shoes in the pandemic lockdown. I have a lot of them, but I only really wear slippers now. It might surprise you to learn that oil and gas practically invented big data. The upstream industry has been selling its subsurface data for years. But for the most part, the industry just stops there. Data is viewed as something that's scarce. It's to be hoarded, or maybe you put it on a shelf, or maybe you just ignore it. And now the industry is in desperate need of smart people who really understand data and how to put data to work. Quite frankly, it's just not fair that the industry that lights the night, that fuels all of our cars, that allows us to go on travel vacations, is actually losing out to the likes of Mark Zuckerberg. There are fortunes to be made here if you can just figure this out. What I want to do today is walk you through just a handful of some examples. How many of you give much thought to grains of sand? Oil and gas cares a lot about sand, or more generally, rock. A company called Enersoft uses inexpensive $300 camera sensors to take high-definition photos of drilling cuttings. As a drill bit is grinding its way through rock building a new well, it's sending these bits of rock and stone back up to the surface. These are called cuttings, these little bits, and they're used by geologists to try and figure out what's actually down there. Mining companies pore over these drilling cuttings like a new bride inspecting a diamond. Enersoft takes these photos, feeds them into a machine algorithm, and pieces them together in the cloud. And then it searches for value at the grain of sand level in the cloud in real time while you're drilling. The old-fashioned way was to send these cuttings off to the lab and wait 6 weeks. And of course, the cost of all that lab kit is in the multi-thousands of dollars. Enersoft generates 2 terabytes of data per well. In comparison, you could purchase and store the entire library of all available data about over 500,000 wells in Western Canada in just a few gigabytes. They're generating 1 million times more data per well. Or how about a company called Rogue 7? Rogue 7 believes that human operators of pipelines today can't possibly optimize pipelines fast enough given how much data pipelines generate. Instead, you feed a machine learning algorithm the actual operating data from your pipeline over some period of time, and the algorithm can then predict the pipeline performance 4 hours ahead of time. Now you might ask, what are these 4 hours worth? Well, they're immensely valuable. Operators can fiddle with the dials to improve performance. They can remove a bottleneck. They can reduce the emissions, or maybe they can extract a little bit more capacity. Or, if time permits, play a quick game of Super Mario. This can mean a lot when you can't easily build a new pipeline. What are the kinds of data involved here for pipeline companies? Well, it's product orders. It's the volumes being ordered. It's the product composition, the throughput rates, the price of energy, even the weather conditions, in addition to outages and pressures and the like. Historically, pipeline data was never collected with this purpose in mind. And for my third example, consider Imperial Oil. Imperial Oil has an oil sands plant in northern Alberta. It's so big that it has 50,000 maintenance projects to schedule and deliver every week. This is nigh impossible, even for a well-functioning team that knows what it's doing. But you know what? It's child's play for a computer if you have the right data. Now, what's common to all of these examples is that they're based on data. The oil and gas industry runs on data, and it's in desperate need of people who understand that data and how to put that data to work in algorithms and analysis. And the industry has some of the crunchiest problems to work on because of its complexity, the sheer scale of it, and this enormous backlog of data that has not yet even been touched. And now the industry must face its greatest challenge. How do we keep all these trains, planes, and automobiles running while we transition to these new energies? All of this is going to require data to pull it off. So at DATAcated, at this conference, you're hearing a lot from a whole bunch of different industries and all their clever ideas and their clever technologies. But me, I just want to keep my lights on and I want to keep my car running. Not to mention, I want to take a flight on a vacation on a plane a lot larger than a Havilland Beaver and wearing more than just my slippers. Thanks so much for your attention today.
Jeffrey, that was amazing. The chat is exploding with commenting applause of your creativity here, and people are loving the laugh track. That was awesome. Thank you so much for a very creative and innovative presentation. We do have time to take a couple of questions.
Bring them on.
Awesome. So I'll start with a question here from Svetlana, and her question is, what are the biggest hurdles in digitalization of oil and gas industry?
The biggest issues, culture and mindset, right? It's not technology. Technology is the easy part. We have an industry that for 100 years has been trained and has put into place infrastructure to behave in a certain way. And now we want it to behave in a completely different way. And it's the people that have been trained up through the university systems to build this infrastructure and run it in a certain fashion have to change their mindset. That is the single biggest challenge. It's not technology. So
it's not technology. Interesting. No. Yes. We've got a comment here from Keith. So he's saying massive amounts, but we struggle to use it effectively. Yep. I'm not sure what exactly he was referring to here. I'm assuming, is it the massive amounts of data or?
It's probably the massive amount of data. They take a pump as an example. In an oil refinery, we'll have thousands of pumps. These pumps are all every 10 milliseconds. They're taking a little measurement. How fast am I running? What's my operating temperature? How much pressure am I under? What's my vibration? Every 10 milliseconds, they take a measurement. And this data flows in through a controller. And that data pops up on the screen, and the operators stare at it to make sure that it's within the the acceptable operating range. But where does that data go? And how do you? It's the volumes are beyond our comprehension as to how much data we're actually talking about here. It's extraordinary how much data, and yet it's not used. That's the prize that's sitting out there.
Yeah, I think there was a statistic out there that a very, very large percentage of data that is collected is actually not used. And it was a crazy percentage. I'm not going to try to remember the exact number, but it was, I believe, way over 80% of data that's collected is actually not used. So that was interesting.
That's certainly the factor at Suncor. I mean, they actually, because if you're in a company, you know how much storage you've got because you're getting a bill for it if it's in the cloud or it's on your premises software or hardware. So you can actually calculate how much of it you're actually using versus you're storing. That's a huge amount.
Yeah. And we'll take one more question here. Keith is asking, have you seen anyone effectively take advantage of data in oil and gas?
There's lots and lots of examples. The 3 examples I shared, for instance, would be good examples of those. But yes, there's lots and lots of examples of companies that have taken advantage of their data, done something creative with it. As an example, there was a company in Calgary called NAL Resources. They've been purchased, so no longer existing. What they did was they took all of the paper contracts that they had accumulated over the years, all the business dealings they had with people. They fed them through a machine learning algorithm that read the contracts and then plucked out of the contracts the actual legal terms that were the drivers of the calculation of a payment. Mm-hmm. How much am I going to be owed? What's the percentage rate? When is it going to be paid? What currency is it going to be paid in? And then fed that data into a robotic process tool that auto-generated the Excel spreadsheet to do the calculation. And then they auto-paid the bill. And this eliminated all of this back office nonsense that they were going through month after month after month, paying people to read the same contracts over and over again, trying to find the right clauses. Wow. I mean, it's simple, but the speed improvement was 95%.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Jeffrey, it sounds like that is all the time that we have, but there are questions in the comments around how you were able to keep a straight face during the presentation with all the laugh tracks behind.
That's a good question. I can share my secrets if you're interested.
Yes, so Jeffrey showed me a couple of interesting secrets in our prep call, so that was really fun. But Jeffrey, thank you so much for your wonderful, innovative presentation here today. Lots of insights, and we will see each other online.
You bet. And here's for the DATAcated.
I'll have to pick that up for myself. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.
All right, we're going to keep this data party moving with our very next speaker, Kimberly Sorrell. She's the Director of Information Management at Southern Company, and she's going to talk to us about data and analytics, predicting equipment health for key plant, for plant equipment. Kim is the Director of Information Management Office at Southern Company. She's responsible for strategy and execution for data, data analytics, big data, content management, and AI. She's very passionate about data and enjoys doing machine learning in her spare time, because of course, everyone does machine learning in their spare time, Kim. So I actually first met Kim when we did a LinkedIn Live session a couple of weeks back. We talked about results-driven data literacy with Matt Cowell from QuantHub. And I'm really, really excited to have her back on our live show here today. So Kim, without further ado, welcome to the DATAcated Conference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hop off the stage and I'll get your presentation going for you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So welcome, everybody. I've had an opportunity to be backstage for the last couple of sessions. So I'm really excited, a little scared to follow those up, but very excited about data, and obviously data in the energy industry, working for Southern Company. One thing that, and I did speak about data literacy a couple of weeks ago, and we have instituted a data literacy program here at Southern Company. I almost talked about that today. I'll probably trickle some things in as I talk about a very specific use case that we worked on. I know one of the things that was discussed in the last presentation was just the plethora of data. Also the culture. You couldn't see me, but I was shaking my head yes and agreeing with everything that was said about culture. So as we try to move toward more digitization and utilizing data for what I'll call the common good for Southern Company, there have been a lot of conversations about, a lot of people are working on various things for conditional type maintenance and stuff using sensor equipment, or sensor data rather. And so something we had an opportunity to do with one of our plants, and probably kicked off around, time flies when you're having fun, sometime in 2019-ish. And so this has actually been in place for a little while. So we actually have some lessons learned and so forth. And so without further ado, I just have a few slides here to really talk about the process of what we did with the data, what we did with the analytics, some of the findings that we had, and then a couple of dashboard examples of what we came up with. So as we started down this road, we talked about some of our imperatives. And the big question was, how can we leverage data, whether it be from sensors, from locations, from work orders, from national instruments, so forth and so on, to move toward more of a predictive maintenance model. We've been in this preventative maintenance kind of operational model for some time, where, maybe, and I'm no engineer, guys, but maybe you go tighten a bolt or, something like that. I'm making it sound simpler than it is. I know it's not. Every 6 months or what have you. And so you would have periods of time that that some of the pieces of equipment may actually go down, or sometimes, these plants are huge. The preventative maintenance is very expensive. You have to bring in lots of big equipment and special contractors and stuff like that whenever you're doing things like taking out a boiler water circ pump, for example. Which leads me to my next question here, is what piece of equipment do I select? So we sat around a table and talked about different data and what we have available and so forth and so on. I think one of the things that was very helpful is that with any of these projects, and we've been able to do a few successful projects throughout the organization. Really, we divided into a few phases, and that first phase is going in and looking at the data. What is available? Are there processes that need to change? What does the quality look like? And so I know that's very, very germane to what each of us on this call and then this conference are dealing with day to day. And is the objective one that can be achieved? We have had some consulting engagements where we've had to say, we don't have this, this, and this. I think we need to move, kind of move the needle a little bit in a slightly different way. So you have to be willing to what we call, and I'm sure I know we didn't coin the phrase, but fail forward fast, is be able to really look at our results and as a group make decisions from those as to whether to proceed down the current path or not. And then what other information can be gleaned from this process? So you have we had actually a really big aha from one of the sorry, I have dogs and stuff barking in the background, so I apologize for that. But anyway, as far as something else that can be gleaned from the process, for example, we were able to really figure out which vendors were doing a better job, because there were some vendors that we would send things out to do what was called a motor rewind. And then you could see that there was a half-life after some and maybe like a 3/4 life after others. So it really helped us hone in on, are there any type of training opportunities, or are there just some vendors that are just doing a better job? So we selected a boiler water circ pump. We divided it into 3 phases. And the initial phase was just really talking, figuring out what data is available. And, one of the things that is probably going to be very, very, it's going to hit home with a lot of people here, is that we don't let things fail. And I'm not suggesting that we do. But because there aren't failures, it's very difficult to find a failure proxy. So a lot of people say, I want you to predict failures. So we kind of went from predicting, or kind of going from down the path of predicting failures to, hey, can we predict the health of the equipment? So we started looking at, and initially, since this was one of the first forays down this path, we really did a lot of education with users. We did a lot of education for the people that were on these projects, as far as, plant operations and stuff. But I think the real synergy there was that we did initially work on outputting a statistical model that was explainable. So we hear a lot about being able to explain why the output, the results, the output is what it is. And interestingly enough, oftentimes if people don't have a full understanding of that, there may not be a full trust for the process. So just real quickly, so I'll have time for some questions. After phase 2, we were able to put out a statistical model dashboard. We used some various techniques like principal components analysis and various regression models and stuff. But at the end of the day, we were still able to say these factors, for example, filter changes, various movement of some pumps, I think there was a specific unit that was not operating as well as others, which kind of led us to some of the half-life data. But at the end of the day, what we came up with is that there are 4 units, and then within each unit there are 4 pumps. We were able to, so that's why you see the ABCD, but we were able to do kind of a red light or traffic light type of dashboard. So we call it a health risk dashboard. And as folks see, if you see something turning red, then it has a much higher propensity to fail than if it were green. And, we worked with the business to figure out what those propensity levels were. So we've actually been able to successfully predict a couple of failures now. The next thing we did is we moved into the AI model. And within the AI model, we tried a lot of different stuff, various deep learning. For this specific type of data, we wound up settling on a random forest XGBoost paradigm. And I think I had that here. Just kind of gives you some ideas on the tuning. But of course, once we get to that point, we made the model better, but now we can, it's no longer explainable. That we actually are running the two side by side, just to do comparisons and see what type of information that we can glean from the various types of models. At a high level, it's been working pretty well, and we are looking at other pieces of equipment to move this toward. So, any questions?
All right, thank you so much for that, Kimberly. I'm just going to remove the screen. All right, here we are. Yes, we have plenty of questions. Before we get into questioning, Kim, a lot of people want to meet your dog. So if you can let the doggy in.
Let's see. You saw me I'm sorry about that. Grab the door, and I think he has skedaddled now. So,
okay. Well, maybe next time.
He is a gorgeous French bulldog who was.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, who was chasing this little guy. This is my kitty cat.
Perfect. Now we have pets at the DATAcated conference. I love it.
Yes.
Kim, let's take a few questions. So Raymond here is asking a question, and he's saying, did you look at all the data you have at first, or do you look at a business outcome that you need and then look at the data that will support it?
That's a very good question. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? It's typically you want to go into it with an understanding of what you're attempting to do.
Yeah.
But we were all kind of sitting around the table and really didn't even know what was available. So this was kind of that first foray into what is available. What is available for plant data? What makes sense? Some of the things we've even talked about doing is we use Maximo for a lot of work order management, and across all the plants, there's not necessarily common nomenclature. So we've actually been floating, making some of these models better and stuff like that by doing some NLP on that type of data to create a more varied and rich data set.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Yep. The next question here comes from Kurt. He's asking, how will AI be used to enhance the energy industry's overall security from remote-based attacks?
Ooh, that's a good question. I bet you heard about a certain pipeline recently. It's interesting. I'm not a security expert by any stretch of the imagination. I actually just took probably a year or so ago, a cyber physical security class with someone at Georgia Tech, Dr. Raim Baya. It's interesting. On NPR had him maybe do 20 minutes of discussion on that very topic. So I'm going to actually suggest that you go find that and speak with him, or see that. But I will tell you that there are a lot of conversations about security.
Yeah.
There's very tight physical security at our plants, and also non-physical security. But they're definitely even looking toward doing data centers that are more secured and so forth. But definitely something that's a topic right now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's several comments coming in around security, so it's definitely a hot topic. Juan Pablo says, Kimberly's the best. I agree. Great presentation and personality, and the cat cameo. So thank you, Juan. Awesome. Well, Kimberly, it seems like this is all the time we have for today. Unfortunately, we do have so many more questions that came in. If you've got the time to jump in on LinkedIn and answer a couple of those, that would be much appreciated by the audience.
Will do.
Awesome.
Will do. Thank you. And Simon says bye.
Okay, bye. So cute. Thank you so much, Kimberly.
Take care. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and move this data party forward, and we're going to move on to the one and only Bernard Marr. He's the founder and CEO and author at Bernard Marr & Co. Today, he's gonna talk to us about transformation and datacation of the energy sector. He gets bonus points for throwing the word datacation into his title. A brief intro here for those who might not know him. Bernard Marr is a world-renowned futurist, influencer, and thought leader in the field of business and technology. He's the author of 18 best-selling books. He writes a regular column for Forbes and advises and coaches many of the world's best-known organizations. He has 2 million social media followers and was ranked by LinkedIn as one of the top 5 business influencers in the world. I actually personally met Bernard Marr when I was reading one of his many, many books. I was reading Data Strategy, and I remember I reached out to him to thank him. And yes, we've been connected ever since. Definitely could recommend his Data Strategy book to anybody who wants to learn how to build an effective data strategy. All right, without further ado, here is Bernard Marr. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you so much for having me. What a great job you're doing again with another amazing conference.
Thank you so much, Bernard. I won't take up more of your time. I'm hopping off stage and it's all yours. I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Very good. No worries. Thank you, Kate. Hi, everyone. When Kate asked me to which topic I wanted to present on today, I could have easily spoken on all key topics, but for me, anyone who's read anything that I write about, I'm super passionate, obviously, about data and technology, but I'm also really passionate about using this amazing technology that we now have, using AI and machine learning and all the data we have to do things that actually really matter to our world. And for me, the two topics that are probably most important for me personally that are covered in this conference are healthcare, which is obviously super important, especially in times of Corona. But for me, energy is even more important because I believe that the energy crisis, the global climate crisis that the world is facing at the moment could very easily dwarf what we are currently experiencing with the coronavirus pandemic. And for me, if we can use these amazing tools that we have, and if we can use data to tackle one problem, then for me, it has to be energy. And for me, our traditional ways of generating energy are exploitative, they're unsustainable, and they're designed for a world of the past. And it's no exaggeration to say that I consider transforming the energy sector to be one of the most important challenges we face in the world. And this means we need to use the data capabilities, the data science skills, and the technology capabilities we have to tackle this. And I believe we will achieve this energy transition that is required by tackling 3 key main issues. One is decarbonization. So we need to transition towards a clean, carbon-free world, largely by increasing the use of renewables, and also making us increasingly aware of the premiums that come with using fossil fuels. So there's the first challenge there. The second area we need to tackle is a massive challenge of decentralization. We need to create distributed energy production. So instead of these highly centralized grids that we are currently using, we need to distribute this. We need to bring into all of the renewable energy sources, whether they're solar panels on our roofs or wind farms and all of this. And this is a big challenge. How do we feed this back into the grid? How do we distribute this in the most efficient way? And the third one is digitization or datafication. And this is all about using digital machines, devices, and technology to optimize energy production, infrastructure, and the use of energy. And think of this as the intelligent energy. And for me to realize this vision of smarter, more diverse energy grids, we need intelligent devices and technology that help us, A, to communicate with the grid so demand can be monitored and managed, and B, help us all reduce our energy consumption. So these are the things we need to do. And sometimes we talk about energy 4.0. And for me, the things that we can actually leverage are things like artificial intelligence and predictive analytics to analyze and predict demand, adjust where power is drawn from on the distributed grid, and predict equipment failures. And GE, for example, uses AI to predict failures ahead of time at their wind and solar plants, for example. Another key thing we can use is the Internet of Things, and in particular, the use of smart home thermostats and home energy management systems, such as Google Nest, which is helping consumers to cut their energy usage and heat their homes or cool their homes more efficiently. Another key technology for me is blockchain. So from secure smart contracts to facilitating the distributed networks, blockchains could be really transformative technology for the energy sector. In one example comes from a Turkish startup. They're called BlockZ, and their blockchain technology enables anyone to access economical, transparent, and traceable green electricity. So this is another key challenge. It's not all we have to obviously electrify our grid, but we also have to make sure that the electricity we use then to power things like our cars and homes in the future has to be green energy, and blockchain technology enables us to do this. And then we have quantum computing. So the sheer power of quantum computers is ideally suited to solving the unique and vast challenges facing the energy sector. As an example, US-based startup QCware, for example, provides quantum computing solutions to help optimize energy use, including energy prediction and demand management. And then we have things like digital twin technology. So we have advanced digital duplicates of real world objects, systems, or processes. And by using information gathered from IoT sensors in the real world, organizations can then model changes and try them out in their digital twins without making expensive or high risk alterations to the real life counterpart. And BP, for example, uses digital twins to model new oil field productions, for example. And in another example, MHPS, Tomoni's digital twin technology can create a virtual replica of a power plant or even entire grid. So for me, these are hugely important challenges we are facing. And I have worked with a number of companies in the energy sector. One of my long-standing clients is Shell, and I've actually designed their data strategy. Kate mentioned my book, Data Strategy. So Shell is one of the case studies in the book. And I'm just currently writing a second edition of that book that should come out later this year with many updates around the latest use of AI across really all industries. And well, I thought I'd share some of the things that we did in Shell to really drive their data agenda. And whenever I help companies, develop a data strategy, we look at some of the key elements in your organization, or the key use cases where data can make a real difference. The first one is to improve decision making across the business. So this is all about finding the best ways to use data to inform any type of decision making. So what you need is, you need to improve the data literacy across the organization. You need to have the right culture in place, and the right data in place, the right quality of data, and the right infrastructure. And when this was identified as a key use case in Shell, and they wanted to really improve the use of data across their entire organization, right from the top of the organization for the most strategic decision making, right to anyone using any data. And one of the challenges they saw is that there was not enough data literacy in their organization. So they partnered with companies like Udemy to create a customized data literacy course for anyone in Shell, and they gave everyone the opportunity to take part in this. They also tackled organizational culture. One of the job roles they put in place was a data translator. So this was a person that sits between the data science team and the business functions, then help communicate both ways. So they help the businesses understand how they can use better data, what systems are available, what data is available, how they can analyze it. And they also work with the data science team to help them better communicate and tell stories around the data and the insights that they've collected. They also hold these regular data hackathons, which I think is a really good idea. They even, during lockdown, run these virtually, where basically anyone in the business can come to this hackathon and say, oh, this is a challenge I have with my data, this is with my business. Can we use data to help us do something with this? And then you have data science team members in this hackathon that then can help you tackle some of those challenges. And of course, in order to make all of this happen, we need to have the right data in place. We need to have the right technology infrastructure in place. So Shell moved to a big Azure data lake. Before, they had so many diverse data sets. Now they're pulling it all into one data lake. They have some good data visualization and data analytics platforms on top, things like Alteryx and Tableau, that can enable them to extract insights from this data. So this is, for me, the first use case. Another really important use case is to understand customers. And again, what Shell is doing is they're using AI to monitor and predict the demand for electrical charging terminals. So they're now creating a complete new infrastructure to make sure they are ready for electric cars. And they want to make sure that this is all optimized. So they want to understand the usage throughout the day, so they can then supply the power efficiently and effectively to make sure all of these smart data grids these smart energy grids are actually working well. Another key use case is around rethinking your products and services and making them smarter. And companies like GE are working on this Internet of Energy, where they're almost trying to find a digitization of the energy to really understand how the energy is flowing through the system. In Shell's case, they now have more intelligent charging stations, for example. But also companies like Nest are supplying or creating smarter products in this space. Another massive use case for Shell and another key use case for anyone thinking about the use of data is smarter operations, where you really reimagine how you run your business. And in Shell, this includes existing infrastructure, so where they're still trying to find more precise drilling routes using AI, where they use predictive maintenance on their existing infrastructure, where they're monitoring security. So they're using things like machine vision on their forecourts in a number of countries to detect that someone might be doing something they shouldn't be doing, things like smoking, for example, and then an automatic announcement can come up saying you shouldn't really smoke near flammable liquids. But in Shell's case, they've looked at other cases where they're now using AI and data analytics in their contracts, for example. So their lawyers in the past spent a lot of time going through contracts, making sure the contract adhered with their policy. They need to identify specific paragraphs in the contract that they wouldn't want to sign. Nowadays, this is all outsourced to AI, so natural language processing is using it. And the last use case is monetization, where you think, but how can we actually make use of this? And I guess Google is a great example of this, of companies that try to monetize their data that they're getting back from the energy space.
Bernard Marr, sorry to interrupt you here. I want to make sure we have a couple minutes for maybe one or two questions. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. The audience is really excited to have you here. A lot of folks already know you clearly from your newsletter, from your books, from your Forbes articles, and so forth. So let's try to take maybe one or two questions, if that's okay with you. We'll go ahead and start here. The question is, do you believe that data governance and security is a continually increasing challenge, especially in the energy sector?
Yes, hugely. And this is actually one of the points I could have spent a lot more time on each of these topics. And actually, when you think about using data for any of this, you need to have a good data governance structure in place and good policies, and making sure the data is safe and secure and you have the right access rights. And Shell spent a lot of time when they created their data lake to make sure this was in place. So for every bit of data, they thought about this very carefully, saying, why do we need this data? Who will need access to this data? How do we protect this data? Does it adhere to all privacy and data security requirements? And this is absolutely hugely important. So, and I guess the pipeline issue that we've just experienced in the US is a reminder that security is hugely important and can never be underestimated. So yes, is the answer.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. And we'll take one more question here. It's around HVAC industries and how can they utilize blockchain technology in growing market acceptance?
Yeah, I think there's so many different industries that can leverage blockchain technology and potentially transformative, especially around, for me, again, lots of different industries are now applying this, from retail to financial services, obviously to energy. And I think especially the validation of where green energy comes from, because I can subscribe to a green energy supplier. The energy still comes to the same system, the same grid. So how do I make sure that this is actually verified? So this is, I think, a big use in the energy sector, as well as smart contracts. I think is another big use case for blockchain technology.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Bernard. Definitely people are loving your presentation, saying this is really insightful. Yes, another one saying it's really insightful. Absolutely. Always a pleasure to have you at the DATAcated Conference, and really thank you so much for your time here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Bernard
much.
is dedicated. I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye, Kate.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right. We're going to go ahead and bring up our next speakers who are actually going to help us close out day one of the DATAcated Conference. Let me go ahead and introduce our two speakers. We're going to have Tom Maroney, who's a member of ARIA's Global Senior Advisory Council, joined by Lindsay Manna, the EVP of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships at ARIA. They're going to talk to us about the oil industry and how it's a game changer, connecting the data to the decisions with NLG, natural language generation. Tom Maroney is an experienced senior executive with a demonstrated history of working in the oil and energy industry. While at Royal Dutch Shell, Tom managed and led a 150-person organization of engineers, scientists, technologists, technicians, and contractors with associated experimental infrastructure across several geographies and cultures. In this capacity, accountable for all global research and development, innovation, and deployment activities for several flagship technology platforms. Lindsay Manna is the SVP of Business Development and Partnerships at ARIA NLG. Lindsay's background includes a career focused around her two biggest passions, which are technology and business strategy. She began her experience in software as a service technology at Diligent Board Member Services as manager of finance, growing Diligent from a concept to IPO. Her passion for people was met with a new passion for technology. In 2010, when she became a partner at Strategic Brand Consulting, helping businesses accelerate growth through sales and marketing. At Aria and LG, she's currently working to bring customers a strategy-geared approach to their data through the power of natural language generation. Her driving force is family, and you'll find her cheering on her 3 kids and husband all weekend long at their various sporting activities. We do have a special treat for you guys here today. Aria is giving away a $250 gift card to the best question asked. So go ahead and get your questions ready for Tom Marodi and Lindsay. I'm going to bring them up on stage. And yes, $250 Amazon gift card will be provided to those who, to the person who asks the best question, which will be selected after the conference. Hello, Tom. Hello, Lindsay. Pleasure to have you here today.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me.
Hello, Kate. Thank you. Lindsay, hello.
Hello.
I'm going to hop off stage and I'll join you in about 15, 20 minutes to take some questions from the audience.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Well, what a great segue there from Bernard. Fantastic talk. And he talked about data literacy across the organization, even equipment monitoring and systems like digital twin, which Tom and I are both very familiar with. This talk really builds on what Bernard was speaking about, and we're going to be discussing the enablement of the articulate enterprise and the articulate oil and gas field. And that's really what Bernard was talking about. Great. He was talking about Shell. I didn't realize Bernard was going to be talking about Shell today. So that's pretty cool, Tom, because we're really lucky to have a Shell veteran in Tom with us today, who's been an oil and gas and energy expert for, should I name how many decades, Tom? 3 decades or more? So we're really lucky to have Tom today. Tom is certainly a pioneer and innovator in his own right, using technology to accelerate data understanding across companies like Shell and many others. So I'm really lucky to be here with you today, Tom. So thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, Lindsay. Look forward to the chat.
Great. So a lot of great questions prepared for Tom and not a lot of time, so we'll get started. The impact that data specifically, Tom, has had in your area of expertise in oil and gas has certainly evolved over time, and we're seeing this across many industries. But Bernard was touching on this too, especially in oil and gas and energy. We've seen this evolution of data. We've seen lots of use cases where data understanding is mission critical, ranging from surveillance, TPR, total process reliability, equipment monitoring, supply chain, finance, and many, many more. What's changed specifically, Tom, in your opinion, specifically in the last 5 to 10 years in data in oil and gas and energy companies?
Great. Yeah, that's a great place to start, Lindsay. The oil and gas industry that, as you mentioned, I have been a part of for 3.5 decades. A lot has changed, and a lot has changed with respect to data. But actually, it's always been an industry awash in data and information, right? Absolutely immersed in it. I've spent my 3.5 decades in the industry, in the engineering part of Royal Dutch Shell and another company in the upstream sector, where you're always talking about really 2 realms: the inflow realm, which is the subsurface primarily in the drilling of wells and the complexity of reservoirs and geology, and the outflow part of the outflow realm, which deals with the wellbore and then all of the processing equipment on the surface. So as you might imagine, there is just a tremendous amount of data that the industry has always immersed itself in. But clearly, over the last 10 years, even over the last 5 years, there have been things that have changed, right? Clearly, the volume of data has accelerated. The velocity of information and data coming in has certainly stepped up. The accuracy has improved. The explosion of devices, the mobility of data. So everyone in the organization has a device or multiple devices. They're accessing a massive amounts of information at any point in time. I think the other thing, that has changed without getting at this stage into, the evolution of storage technologies and so forth, but, and Bernard made this point, the concept of data literacy certainly has evolved on the stage as a key enabler, and the notion of thinking in a more structured manner about our data, right? So there are measured pieces of data, there are calculated, there are interpreted pieces of data, and how one goes about processing all of that has to be thought about differently. So that would be another area that has certainly changed and improved quite dramatically over the last decade, 5 years, and it's still evolving today.
Yeah, well, you gave a great precursor to the next two questions. So we'll separate the two pieces out so that we can discuss them separately. But the next question is, how has this centralization, availability, and quantity impacted the ability to understand data? We have all this data. It's all in one place. It's available. Now what? So how has that impacted that? And then my follow-on, we're going to dive into data literacy a bit.
Right. So I might start with the second and just merge the two together. So the notion of centralization of data and the storage of data, and whether you're talking about on-prem or in the cloud or edge analytics, et cetera, it all comes down to fundamentally two aspects: having sound data models and integration, right? So it's not simply centralization, but it's the ability to integrate that data that's going to ultimately drive sense making and actually is going to move you along the data literacy maturity curve, right? Now, when I'm talking about data models, again, the industry is awash in data, and each engineering discipline sort of has its own wealth of data, whether you're talking about geologists or reservoir engineers dealing with rock properties of the reservoir, or the fluid properties of the fluids contained in the reservoir, the well designs. And so as you work your way through this very complex system, both from an inflow and an outflow perspective, understanding the underlying data model, in other words, how the data is going to get pieced and integrated together in a way that's going to allow the end user to interpret and make sense out of what that information is telling them, is fundamentally key. So centralization is absolutely critical to the extent that it drives a data model strategy, and that has to be supported by how you integrate and ultimately consume and use the data into decision making, which was another point Bernard had made.
Yeah, and that's really, are you data literate? Do you understand the data? So that kind of follows on to, we're talking about this, this decision making capability. And in order to make a really smart decision, you've got to be data literate, understand that data, be able to do that very quickly, right? We talk about speed, accuracy, consistency, which plays into, do you have the right models in place? Do we have a data dictionary? Do we understand? Is that consistent across the organization? One person might understand it differently than the other. So data explanation has to be consistent. It's got to be fast. But translating these concepts into something we've discussed, Tom, prior to today, you called it the maturity of decision making, and I really loved your terminology there when we were talking as we were prepping for this session. All these concepts of data literacy, data understanding. We say all these words, but what does it really mean to have that mature capability of decision making? And can you elaborate on what that means to you, and specifically in your area of expertise, this term maturity of decision making?
Okay, yeah, and I'll do that, Lindsay, by first starting with a concept of value loop, because I think this is fundamental. And at the end of the day, the winners, the ones that are ultimately going to drive value for a company, for their shareholders, are the ones that can drive value out of their data, right? So we're not just in this to collect data, to have it show up on, to outfit a piece of equipment with all kinds of IoT devices, which we can now do today, and have it show up on devices all over the organization into anyone's hands, which is fantastic. But it is fundamentally about closing the value loop, right? And the value loop starts with understanding what is that asset that I'm trying to optimize, and that asset is going to drive everything that you're thinking about, your data models, the integration that has to happen. So your asset could be a well, it could be the entire oil field. You're trying to, again, to look at how that oil field needs to be further optimized with subsequent recovery mechanisms or infill drilling opportunities. The asset could be a specific reservoir, could be a piece of equipment. You've got your asset, then there's a data plan, right? And again, your data models support that plan. What data needs to be collected such that I can get the information I need to make the decisions. And I'll get back to decisions in a minute, because here's where we get to the maturity of your decision making, which is fundamentally where I'm driving to, right? But that decision leads to a set of plans, right? So you'll have some options that have to get evaluated, trade-offs made, and ultimately you'll execute that decision, right? Going all the way through that loop is how you drive value, is how you bring value through the P&L to the bottom line. Now, the notion of how large can you make that loop, how much value can be captured, gets us to the question of data decision maturity, right? So is this a question of just understanding what happened, which could be important, but is a very small a small decision to address and answer, right? What happened? Why did that well go offline? What needs to be done? But that single well might be actually a signal to a much bigger opportunity, right? Why did it happen, right? So can I move my maturity from not just what, but to why, right? So not simply descriptive, but more prescriptive set of decision making. And ultimately what I'm trying to get to is, what is the best that can happen, right? That's how I can really maximize that value loop and capture a lot of value, right? So what is that full optimization? How do I go from standard reporting, detecting anomalies in a complex system, all the way to statistical analysis, forecasting, predictive analytics, the things like Bernard was even hitting out with machine learning and AI, which are all technologies that can be introduced to further contextualize or drive up the contextualization of data and information, increasing the value that can be captured ultimately.
Yeah, well, you're talking too about concepts that we talk about every day at ARIA, which is to be really articulate, to be very literate, to really have knowledge and expertise. What happened? Why or how did that happen? So what, who cares? What's the context of that? And then what do I do next? What does that mean overall for our business? Not just specifically for this piece of equipment that I might need to, put on a new rotating schedule so that we get more life out of it. But then what does that mean to the bottom line financially? And pulling that all together as you pull the data together. So as far as I know, Tom, you were the first on the planet in terms of my knowledge bank to use natural language to initiate creating the articulate oil and gas field. So you've been an innovator to solve business problems with brand new innovative technology, which now has been around for quite some time. You've been using and aware of natural language generation for over a decade and understood the power of it very early on. So what does that mean? It's different to a lot of people. What does it mean to be articulate, have the articulate oil and gas field or the articulate oil and gas company? And what excites you most about technology that's really bridging that gap between data availability, centralized data, and then the ability to take intelligent action from that? Because I think that's a lot we were talking about with the concept of mature decision making. It's because you have that data there, because you have that knowledge accessibility, the democratized knowledge that's really allowing, a mature decision. So big loaded question there in terms of the articulate oil and gas field, but I think those concepts really tie to that mature decision making phrase that you use.
Right, and that's what intrigued me many years ago when we first reached out and began working with ARIA on NLG technology and how we could use that to augment many of the other analytics that we were layering into our, Lindsay, you described what is the articulate oil and gas field, and that is really the essence of the question one needs to answer, right? As an organization, as a business unit, what is the sophistication of the intelligence that you want to drive, right, such that you have a fully articulated oil and gas field, right? An oil and gas field that is speaking to your end users, not where your engineers have to spend time collating information, trying to build models that may be relevant, may not be relevant, right? There's a lot of waste. What we found there was a tremendous amount of waste. In some cases, 60% of an engineer's time could be spent wading through, at the end of the day, useless information and data, right? So the sophistication of the intelligence that you want to drive through analytics, through the contextualization of the data into sense making, answers the question of what the articulate oil and gas field is. And I certainly believe NLG is one of the critical enabling technologies, that along with artificial intelligence, along with advanced analytics, can really step an organization towards answering that question for them. What is the sophistication of business intelligence that they want to drive day in and day out for their organization? And it becomes a much more richer environment, for the engineers, for the frontline folks out in the field to do their job.
Yeah, and I've seen pictures, but have never been there of what it feels like to be in the rooms with all those, dashboards and alerts and bells going off, and it feels like it would be just wildly overwhelming to be able to make sense of all that in a short period of time when you're making mission critical decisions. So certainly, it's come a long way, and it's gonna keep evolving and getting better and better. So thank you so much, Tom, for joining me here today and talking about data and NLG, and it's just been an absolute pleasure to chat with you live here at DATAcated. So, Kate, I think we're ready to take some questions from the audience.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for this very insightful discussion. We have definitely more questions that we can handle at this point. I think an incentive helped, but also that the conversation was really interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into our very first question here from Poonam, and the question is, what are the most critical changes that we must make to face the future effectively in the field of data analytics in the oil and gas industry?
I think it gets to exactly the conversation Lindsay and I was just having, right? It was continuing to drive the concepts of data literacy and answering the question of what is the optimized articulate oil and gas field. And you can really put in any industry, insert any industry. I think there was a question earlier during Bernard's talk around HVAC. Well, I think you could place HVAC into there as well. But that really is the challenge, right? These last 5 years, this last decade, there's just been an explosion in technologies, on the storage side, on the analytics side, on the device side, on the concepts of mobility. Making sense of how that puzzle gets pieced together to answer the sophistication of intelligence that the organization needs to drive, right? And it's a creaming curve, right? You can certainly overdo it, but that truly, to me, is the challenge that the industry faces. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We've got another question here from Fadi, and he's asking, how could natural language generation help bridge the gap between data availability and decision making?
Well, certainly on decision making, NLG can help to accelerate closing that gap, right? Again, contextualizing the information so that you're not just looking at, as Lindsay described, a dashboard with a whole bunch of yellow and red alerts. But if you knew that red alert that was appearing on that well was actually an indication of an event that had actually occurred 15 times over the last 6 months, you were on a trend, and you actually got a narrative that described that alert, right, contextualized overall in the performance of that well. Perhaps water breakthrough was imminent. What you would do as an engineer would be different if you had that full narrative versus just having the single red alert, right? If all you had was a single red alert, you would look to react and prevent that alert from getting worse, which again is probably gonna save something from breaking down, but you're not going to capture full value.
Yeah, absolutely. A narrative can definitely help in that situation. I'll move on to the next question here. So it's been said that we only use about 15 to 20% of the data gathered. I've been seeing this metric actually everywhere. How can the oil and gas industry better take advantage of more data being available?
Right. I think that's just the hard work of being clear around what your data literacy objectives have to be to drive decision making, right? And no one can answer that question except the business unit, right? The business unit in the organization has to be rigorously focused on what are those critical value drivers and what are the decisions that need to be made that ultimately capture the value, and then what is the information, and only the information needed to address those decisions, right? Because there are lots of things that can be measured, and over nearly 4 decades in this industry, we capture a lot of data, and in many cases, it's not only that we're capturing too many variables that aren't even necessary, but the frequency at which we gather them and collect them and store them is again not necessary. So can you consolidate? Can you we did a lot of data conditioning in a big analytics program that I was a part of, such that we again only stored the minimum amount necessary to make the decision. So
all right, thank you for that. First of all, Kimberly says that this presentation was so worth the wait. So
no, that's good. Being the end of the day, so that's always helpful.
Yes.
She might win the prize. I'm kidding.
Kimberly. Ramdas is asking, how do you in oil and gas make sure that the analytics insights that is provided is actionable? And I guess you touched on this already with the narrative, right. But if you want to elaborate here.
No, I think I've addressed that question already. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I'll move on to the next one. All right. So Amarachi is asking, how do you ensure that the models used in analyzing data recognize asset build and complexities to enhance proper working solution as against a standardized model?
Oh, okay. So I believe he's referring to. It appears as if he's referring to, the as-built asset as opposed to the standardized model, and how do you make sure that the models used in your analytics recognize the as-built asset and their complexities. Yeah, I think that's got to be part of your whole data strategy that Bernard had spoken to. The concept of data models, and this point has to be addressed as part of that overall strategy. But I agree that the question here is a valid one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. We've got a question here for both Tom and Lindsay here. So how can one be a responsible data generator apart from being a responsible data handler?
Well, I think there's some specifics there, Tom, for oil and gas in terms of data generator. I think we've seen that increase over the years, right? So from data generation, you're better poised to answer that one. Data handler, we certainly see it across multiple industries. It's got to be aggregated to make sense of it, and to cross-correlate between data silos. You have to have it all in one place. And as you said, Tom, we've seen technologies that are helping companies do that now, which is great.
Right. Being a responsible generator of data and generator of information, again, is just being well trained and well versed in the concepts and the terminology. Right. Not all data is equal, as I mentioned. You have structured data. which could be measured, which could be calculated, which could be interpreted, and those are all different, right? So understanding the source of the data is absolutely critical. Then there's the whole category of unstructured data, reports, and so forth. So it's just being very, very rigorous, and it, ultimately it gets back to the data strategy of the company, and making sure it's being executed at the business unit level. One thing we didn't talk on is speak to is the concept of real-time data and information that and this is something that has always plagued the oil and gas industry. You would get real-time volume information and measurement information of well tests, but the actual final allocated volume of what was financially produced and accounted for and working interests were cut off of, wouldn't come for nearly a month later, right? So understanding that lag time and understanding the errors and the level of accuracy that you're dealing with, again, is you've got to have that built into your definitions and how you manage and handle the data. Otherwise, you can wind up using information and driving poor decision making. Right? We've all heard that. What's the old adage? Garbage in, garbage out.
Or goodness in, goodness out. That's another.
And we want goodness in, goodness out.
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. So thank you for that, Tom and Lindsay. We'll take one last question from the audience here. Lisa is asking, how do you meet the challenges such as traditional thinking associated with increasing data literacy that requires big culture changes in making the data important in business processes?
So I think the concept of anchoring ourselves, anchoring our organization around the concept of the value loop, which began with an asset, and then it moved. So there are 4 pieces to it, right? So at the top is the asset, and then understanding again the definition of the asset. And as I said, that could be an entire oil field, it could be a single well, it could be a single reservoir. So there's a scale associated with the asset. Along with that asset would be the data. What data would be collected on that asset? And again, that there would be a data plan, there would be a strategy, there would be a model, right? So what you might have rock data you were collecting, fluid data you were collecting, how all of that got pieced together. The accuracy of each of those measured variables had to be known or at least understood, because then they went into your models, right? And then that drove the options and the interpretation and what plans you would ultimately look at. And then ultimately you would pick, right? You would have some optimization criteria. You were optimizing on production, you were optimizing on value, you were looking to lower cost. And then that's would ultimately drive what you actually executed, what you actually performed. And that might actually cause some change to the asset at the end of the day, right? Increased production. You might wind up adding a couple of wells to the field, right? And so you would continue. But if you thought about if the business unit could get organized around the concept of a value loop, nearly everyone in the business unit in the organization touched that loop at some point, right? So they would be touching that and understanding how they interacted with either the data side of that value loop or the decision-making side, right? The plans, the action, the execution side of that value loop allowed the organization to get aligned in a way that they all saw the importance and criticality of data fueling business decisions.
Got it. Thank you so much for that, Tom. And Lindsay, anything to add before we wrap up our conversation here?
No, it's been fun. I have the comments up. Somebody asked Tom what kind of car you drive. They were so glad to have you here. It's been great to see. I've been watching the comments scroll. You guys are a funny crowd, and a pleasure to be here. And I can't wait to do another event with you, Kate. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Yes, Tom, I've gotten a lot of private messages about, is Tom in a car? And I'm like, yes, this is dedication.
I am in a vehicle. It has been obviously a stationary vehicle. Yes, so safety has been at the foremost top of mind here. But in order to have I'm a bit of a remote location up in Maine. So this enabled me to get to some good IT infrastructure. So.
Well, thank you so much for making the trip, and I loved your comment about driving to success as you were in the car. I'm like, yes,
yes, there you go.
Literally. Thank you both so much. This is really an insightful session. Definitely worth the wait. I really appreciate you both jumping on.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we are coming to a close of day one of the DATAcated conference, but don't leave just now. I do have a fun little surprise for everyone who's stuck around all the way to the end. We're actually going to be giving away one of these pillows. Well, not this exact pillow, because I had to kind of sew it up on the wall there. But I have a brand new DATAcated pillow that we're giving away. And all you have to do to enter the raffle here is to type in #DATAcated into the chat. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen so we can see everyone who types the word #DATAcated being entered into our fun raffle. I really enjoy these raffles, and I think it's a lot of fun. As you do that, I will just remind everybody that if you're tuning in and if you have not officially signed up for the conference, go ahead and do so. Go to datacated.com/conference, enter your details. This will enable you to get some virtual goodies. We will send you a post-conference blog post. We're going to send you all of the recordings from today and from tomorrow in case you missed some of them. They'll actually be packaged up really nicely. And I'll also just look through some of the comments that have been coming in. You guys are really kind for sticking around here. Let's see, Auntie here is saying thanks for day one. See you all tomorrow. I hope to see you guys back. Scott's here with his woohoo, day one. What fun. I agree. I feel like I'm standing here and I don't want this to end. This is really exciting. A lot of DATAcated hashtags are flowing in across various social media platforms. This isn't only on LinkedIn. This is if you're tuning in on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch. Just type the #DATAcated. I don't think the lowercase or uppercase really matters. Just make sure you include that hashtag because StreamYard will pull all of that in. Oops, I smacked my microphone. StreamYard will pull all of that into our session. And let's see. We've got so far 59 entries. I'll wait a couple of minutes to make sure you all have an opportunity. I will ship this pillow to whoever wins, wherever you might be. So looking forward to this giveaway. Looking at some of the comments here, Matthew, thank you very much for staying around. Thank you so much, Matthew. Folks have enjoyed the event. I really appreciate that. Part of the email you're going to get tomorrow or the day after when I've got all of this packaged up for you will include a feedback survey because it's really important for me to try and improve every time that I put together these DATAcated conferences. We likely will have one more in the fall of this year, so stay tuned for an announcement around that event later, probably later in May or June. I'll make that announcement. But either way, let's see what we've got here. Yes, that feedback survey really helps me because it allows me to improve, right? So I read a lot of comments last time in terms of what I could do better, and I'm trying to incorporate that into the event here. Okay, looking at comments again while you guys type in DATAcated. I promise I'll wait maybe another minute to make sure that, Kimberly does not need the pillow, but love the conference. Thank you so much, Kimberly. You don't need a pillow. Oh my goodness. They're actually really comfortable, Kim. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do the draw. Let me make this big screen so we could see the winner. We're at 79 entries. I'm wondering if maybe I should wait until we hit 80. Oh, look, we hit 80. Okay, so if you're feeling lucky, let's go ahead and draw the winner of the DATAcated pillow. I'll grab it here. Let's see. And the winner is Raymond 10. Raymond, congratulations. You won a DATAcated pillow. We're going to go ahead and ship that out to you. Thank you so much for participating. And thank you, everybody who stuck around. I'm going to stop sharing. Have a great rest of your day. I hope to see you all tomorrow. It's the same time tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern is when we kick things off. I will see you tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of your day.